Hey Akshanyam, how's it going? And NB Katie, how are you doing? We are in, this is going to be kind of like our third of these, and they're not really any set length of time. They're just kind of us going through and working through the book that we have, and then also the labs that we have. So I'm going to hop right into the labs here, and we're going to go down to Linux Lab 10. That's where we broke off from the other day. We got 36 Linux labs. I've got a whole bunch more to add. We just keep adding labs as we go. And you got to remember the focus of our professional Linux users group is to get you guys into doing this stuff professionally. And kind of like the first part of that is getting you doing Linux. So that's what we're focusing on right now is the basics. But we also have other stuff for people who are maybe a little more familiar with Linux and want to get into doing, people that want to get into doing, I'll tell you here in a second, that's a thing called Sumatra, just a PDF viewer. And then you can actually go in the config file of Sumatra and you can invert it. So if you go into it's funny, the options will pull up an actual, where's that? Settings, advanced options. It'll actually pull up the page, right? And then you come in here and you can actually invert the color. So you invert the input and the background color. And when you do that, it'll cause it to be dark mode. So the book is normally rendered in light mode. It's white background with black text, the way that you would expect. But because people don't like me flashbanging the screen, I don't show the book in normal color. I flip it so it's easier for people to see. So hopefully that's clear. But the viewer is a tool called Sumatra. Pretty just free open source tool on the internet. Looks like that. Sumatra PDF. They work, I mean, it works great for me. I love it. One of the nice things about it is if I go back to look at any other PDFs that I've looked at recently, it'll take me right to that spot of the page. So it's kind of nice. Conboard's great, man. That's a great tool. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so it was stolen when I got it. So steal it, please. We're in 10 package managers, and we're looking at, we're given a Linux system. We want to find, update, and remove software. That's kind of our task, right? Task condition standard is the thing that we do in the military, in the U.S. military anyways. And it's like, given this task, here's the conditions. You're dropped into a bash shell of some type. I don't make you build a Linux server. I don't make you do any of that. I just drop you in a shell. Execute and understand the commands. Understand the command output of a given system. So we need to do these tasks, and the standard is we can execute and understand what the commands are. That's what we want to do. So the lab over here says you're a new sysadmin at a company. You need to better understand the software that's installed on your system. That's, God, I'd say that's a huge part of being an admin. I wouldn't say more than maybe like 10% of it, but you're going to get asked by your manager and other projects and other teams and devs and all these. You're going to be kind of expected to be an expert on what's going on inside of your Linux systems. Now, Linux is a vast and wide discipline, and people could have built all different types of servers in your environment maybe before you standardized it to, hey, we're going to use this one type. You don't know what the admin did before you or the engineer before you. So where I'm going with that is you may not remember it all in your head. Most of us don't. We have to know how to go query the system, go pull this stuff out of there. Chat's been disabled on YouTube. I don't know why. I don't think I have chat disabled. Let me check. Reactions are on, moderation, community moderation. I don't see any reason it would be disabled on YouTube, but maybe let me go check. Let me make sure I don't have anything weird going on. Let's see. Huh. I don't know. That's weird. I didn't mean to disable it on YouTube, and I haven't pressed any buttons that should have, so if that keeps going, let me know, I guess. But let me go look here. I'm looking on a kind of tiny screen. Closed captions are off. Alex, viewer activity, stream, health, shop. Let's see, viewer activity. Can people talk? I don't have any settings in there to even mess with. If it's really turned off, yeah, I haven't changed anything in my settings. Probably something on the YouTube side. Yeah. Well, I mean, you can chat over here on Twitch side, so that's good. But you're a new admin, right? And you decide to start looking at the server to see what software package information you can discover. So some of these things we've done in other labs, but it's still good to practice. So if I wanted to list all the packages in the system, I could do dpackage-L, and it'll drop me in kind of this interactive little screen here. And when I say interactive, what I mean is I'm no longer just at a bash prompt. I'm now inside of some type of control here. I can go up and down. I can hit enter to go line by line. I can hit spacebar to go page by page, right? If I want to go find like the H's, and then now I'm in the H's. And I see that we have htop on this system. Okay, cool. Just pick some random thing. But another thing that I find super useful is, you know, there's this old saying, comparison is the thief of joy. And that's probably true if you're comparing yourself to other people and, you know, their success or whatever. But what's not a thief of joy is when we're trying to compare a bunch of servers to see if they've been built the same way. So let's say I'm on this Ubuntu box and I run this and I get 818 over here. And then I go over to some other set of servers or some other server that's maybe in the same cluster with the server, and it's got, you know, 974 packages. That's a problem, man. That's a problem either with your build process or with your server sitting out there so long and changes have happened on it, right? So I like to kind of look at this stuff. Hey, how's it going, Sending Grounds? He's one of my mods, if you guys don't know. So that means we all have to behave because one of the mods is here, right? I'm just kidding. But anyway, so we're on this 10th lab that we have, and it's package managers, and some of this stuff looks like some of the stuff we did before, but we're trying to find, update, and remove software in a system. And really our main problem is we're a new engineer. We're sat down in an environment that we've never been in before, and your manager or other engineers or teams that you support questions are gonna come to you about what's going on in the system. And we have the tools to query it and find it out. So again, dpackage-l is great for how many pieces of software on this server, and I can compare that to 5 other servers to kind of see how similar they are. Because I'll be honest, man, if you told me 5 servers were built at the same time and they were like numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they all had the same number of packages on them, I'd pretty much believe that they were built the same way. It wouldn't. That's not too much of a jump for me. There is one other thing I'd absolutely check, which is this. Across all those servers is how were they booted, because that to me also tells me like the partitioning of a system tells me a lot about how it was booted and how it was created, right? I can tell a lot by like what's going on with this label, because this root label works, but I also might happen to know from other labs that we've done that should be dev VDA under the hood, right? I think it's -f, right? And you could see that under the hood VDA1 is the cloud IMG root FS, and I might know that was true, but if one of the other ones was built with root equals and it was like the VDA1, like somebody had manually went and done it, I'd have been like, huh, what other weird one-offs are going on this server? And then that would spin me off to, like, if somebody said, hey Scott, this one server's having problems, and I saw that, I'd be like, oh, I'm in for a day, because now that's not the same thing as all the other builds. Does that kind of make sense? And if I've got a good CI/CD pipeline, I just hit a button and blow that server away and rebuild them. But that's a little more advanced concept. So, he said, "Is there something like DNF provides for Ubuntu?" I don't know actually. I use DNF what provides often, or I used to use yum what provides. I don't know if Ubuntu has something similar if something's not installed. I know we can do searches with apt and look through package repos and stuff like that, but I'm no expert on apt. In fact, the only reason we have apt, or the only reason we're using Ubuntu, is because that's what Killer Coda provides. If you guys ever do like the Prolog labs and get into lab environment and do any of our stuff, it's all Rocky, right? Because Rocky is RHEL 9 compatible and stuff like that. So yeah. So then we keep coming down, and I say, okay, so maybe you're getting a question from your security team. You know, GRC, Governance, Risk, and Compliance, comes to you and says, hey, what versions of SSL do you have on all your servers? And you go, well, here's all the things that I have that have SSL. And they'll probably be a little more specific. They'll be like, hey, OpenSSL, maybe OpenSSL is having some type of problem. And then we can report back to them across all of our servers that they have, you know, 3.0.13 version of OpenSSL for Ubuntu. And then for people that aren't super familiar, the way risks are going to come to you, the way that CVEs are written, they are always written to the type of software or the package of software or the, you know, whatever the information is about the server in that sense, or the software in that sense, and then also the version. They're always tied to a version, because then when the package is patched or the version gets past it, it's always reported that this is fixed in 3.0.14 or whatever. It always says once you jump to a certain version, and I've always liked that about like vulnerability, the CVEs, because then I know that if I can't get to that version, I have to put in some type of compensating control for my systems. And we've talked about controls in other contexts for people. We're not really getting into that right now, but controls are these ideas of how do we stop something from happening? How do we, there's a whole bunch of things that controls do, but they mainly modify behavior, right? Okay, so anyway, so we did our SSL, and then I say you want to know what a certain package comes from, right? So I want to see if I have like iostat as a command, right? Okay, I have iostat on my system, and I want to know where the command was installed from. Now, this is similar to the what provides. However, this only works if the package is there, which is why I can't say that this would work. This wouldn't work if something wasn't there. This is a file that's there, right, an executable, and I want to see where this thing came from. So dpackage-s for iostat will tell me that iostat comes from the sysstat packages, right? Here's sysstat right here, and then where's my iostat? Where's my actual command for iostat? I think I have it down here a little bit. Yeah, so iostat came from, it was found in the sysstat packages, right? Yeah, there's user bin iostat right there. If you ever need to see where your package, where the executable that you're calling in your shell right now is coming from, you always use which, or where is will work. They give you a little bit different information, but I like which to tell me what my shell's seeing, and then I can say, is user bin in my path? Well, it obviously is because it found it, but it's kind of nice to see. Yeah, let me go. I gotta check this YouTube thing out. This is bugging me. Why does it not have my chat? I definitely didn't. I didn't mean to turn it off. Analytics, go to our analytics. I don't know. Or bash. I think you need where is. Which is also fine. But where is the command. And I've never dug into the history of where is or which, so I can't tell you much more than like a man page could. And really, honestly, I can only tell you how I use the tools, right? A lot of you guys, I've told you guys, like, I'm very vanilla in that, like, once I know how a tool works and does the thing I need, I never dig in on that unless there's a reason for me to. So, like, people ask me, like, all these specific nuanced things because I've been doing Linux for a long time. They'll be like, what about this one little thing about this? And I'm like, let's go read the man page together because I have no effing idea. Oh, command. There you go. Yeah, some of the guys, actually, I want to say it was Kolkus, but I don't want to misquote him. I want to say in like our Bash and System Tricks channel on our Discord, he mentioned something like that one day. Guys were going over when you would use Command V and when you would use which. I think he was part of that discussion, and I think there was a reason some people like the Command-V. I also think some people made the point that Command's not on all servers, so not all. This is another thing. I used to... Because when I first started in early on in Linux and Unix systems administration, I did do a lot of Unix as well. So there was like all these different flavors that I was jumping between. And like I tell people, like they'll be like, well, when would you use less and when would you use more? And I'm like, I always just used more because less wasn't always there. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, more's been around since like I think late 70s, early 70s maybe. And like less isn't always on a system. Like especially older Unix style systems, you don't always have the command less, right? So if you guys are wondering about less and more, so like if you less etc pass wd or something, you can go forward through the file and you can go backward through the file. But if you more etc pass wd, you can only go forward through the file. You can't. I can't keep going back up with more. I can't go back up. I can only go forward. But again, more is a much like more is like the old spell casting from back in the day, right? Like you will always find more on a system unless somebody removed it or something. Yeah. But we're not necessarily parsing out these right now, but there's a lot of stuff that you can do to deal with that particular file, right? You can more logs and stuff, right? So anyways, in this environment, we're just walking through a lab here. Suppose you want to know a certain package, it was installed by a certain command. So you found a command on your system like iostat, and you're like, that's really super useful, but it's not on another server. So now you need to go find where it came from. Now, if we're using, like in the home lab, right? Just go jump. This is beyond like one of our Rocky boxes. I do love this, DNF, what provides iostat. Like, you can use, that's a pretty cool little search function that's always been there from like a Red Hat standpoint. I do not know the equivalent in Ubuntu. In fact, I tell you guys, I don't professionally run Ubuntu. We just use these labs because Killer Code is a great site for that kind of stuff. But if I needed to know where a server got a certain package and it was there, and it was on one, but I didn't have it on the other, this would allow me to kind of go figure out where it came from. In this case, it's sysstat. But then on the other side of it is if I wanted to look at sysstat and see all the packages that had been provided. So I installed some software, but then I just wanted, for some reason, maybe I wanted to gather all the packages that software had ever provided. I would go dpackage-l on sysstat, and it'll show me every package location that was changed by that package. So installing sysstat gave me all of these things. And actually, I remember when I first did this, I remember looking at that going, I didn't realize that it added a cron job. I didn't realize that at all. But now I know it did, and I know exactly where it is. It's in cron.d and cron.daily sysstat. So now I can go say, okay, cron daily tends to run at 3:14 a.m. on most Linux boxes. Pretty sure that's configurable. I've never really looked where, but it tends to run at 3:14 a.m. And we cd to etc cron.d. I don't know who picked that. I don't know the history of that. But sysstat is right here. That's what sysstat's going to try to do. Daily, it's going to do something. It's going to go based off of the etc default sysstat file. There's a configuration file. Now we can go dig into that. It's almost like you're like a forensics team coming later and like looking at what people have done. We can say enabled is equal to false, and then we can go see whatever we're doing here. And then it looks like we're user lib sysstat sa2-a, and then whatever that thing is only happens if this got turned to true somewhere, right? Because down here, it's set false, enabled is false. And then if enabled gets set to true or exit. So it'll, that's true, so something leaves it, and then, all right. That's interesting. I mean, that's an interesting way to write a file, I guess, but I'd never really looked at that before this, right? And you can go dig into what's kind of going on there. Speaking of that, by the way, I should point out, we do have a Bash study group coming up. We've got a bunch of events coming up. But in our Discord, there's a Bash study group in about 2 hours. I don't run that one. There is one late at night that I do kind of run sometimes. Sometimes people just use that as a study, but the one that's coming up is going to have a good number of people in there, and they work on scripting and they work on Bash in general, making you guys get better at it. All right, anyway, so then I want to go read, I want to go see if pidstat is there. So in the package sysstat, I'm wondering if pidstat is there, and then I would see user bin pidstat. I could have also come the other way because the package is there. I could have done this from earlier. Where was that at? That was iostat. I could have looked for, right? And then I could have looked for pidstat that way as well. So I could have searched for basically where it was found in any of the packages. So I don't know. There's just know that there's a backend database on your systems. In Red Hat, it's called the RPMDB, right? It's the Red Hat Package Management Database, and then you can rebuild that database if you need to, and it'll go find all the packages that are on the system, and it'll rebuild them. Sometimes you need to do that before patching and that kind of stuff, especially on enterprise systems where that can get mucked around with by people installing stuff. Admins and stuff. You got a lot of cooks in the kitchen, so then you need to sometimes redo that before you can accept more patches on a system. So, all right. So, anyways, we come down here. We can man dpkg and read about it. It's package manager for Debian, and it gives us a bunch of information about it, right? And then another one, maybe I got asked earlier, so we could man apt, right? And it used to be apt-get, but now it's been shortened. Probably got shortened a few years ago, but it used to be apt-get. And we can go look at this stuff. But one of the things I got asked about was search, right? So maybe I do a /search, and I say search can be used for given regex and available packages and display matches. It can be useful if you're looking for packages that have a specific feature, if you're looking for a package included in a specific file, including a specific file. So this may be useful. So I was asked earlier about like searching for a file or the name of a, because all commands are called by their name, right? So the name of the file has to be in the package. So it sounds like apt-file would be useful to find a file name. So maybe if I was looking for something, I would do that. And then I don't know much about that, so I would do apt-file. And then, oh, there's no manual entry for that. So, right, maybe we'd come down here and we'd go look for how we would do that. I thought we just had, yeah, I was going to say, I thought there was an apt-file. By the way, if you ever need to see all the commands, apt- and then you just hit tab a few times and it'll show you all the versions of it. And it's weird, I don't see apt-file there, so it's kind of interesting. Let's read the man on apt-cache. So they'll give you package cache, they'll give you source cache. So if it's a file to store in the cache, we don't want any of that. We can hit N to keep going through what we're looking for. Config file. Yeah, nothing in there. Okay. Anyways, we're just messing around with that a little bit. We keep coming down. We're going through the lab. Can you find near the bottom what the default log for dpkg is? And we could have found that if we wanted to. Man dpkg. And then look for log maybe. And then the log file, the default log. So if I don't set the log, right? I can set a log, guys. I can change the behavior of all kinds of commands in Linux. That's one of the nice, powerful things about it is if I know how to use my command line options, or what we sometimes call switches, you'll hear them interchangeably used. The default is var log dpkg.log. So everything I do goes in there, right? Every change I make, everything I add. But I can change that if I wanted to put it in some other place. And then they tell us the log message form, which is useful if we have to go parse that later, or if we're feeding it out of, maybe I don't want to use varlog dpkg for some reason. I don't know why you wouldn't. But let's say everything that goes in, I don't know, var splunk or something. I got a var splunk directory. Who knows why? Instead of varlog. I throw it into var splunk so that it then gets pulled out by Splunk. And maybe inside of Splunk, I know you don't have to do this, but let's say inside of Splunk you had to format your own directories. One of the nice things about Splunk is it just figures all this stuff out for you. That's why a lot of companies like it, is it's very like just plug it in and it works. But for us, maybe we need to write something. Maybe we're doing Graylog or something, and we need to define our format. And there's our time date stamp before the actual rest of whatever we were doing. Okay, so we get this, and then when did the system install? So let's get out of here. When did the system install dpkg? And it's funny, I originally wrote this. So varlog dpkg.log. When I originally wrote this, if I were to show you like the background of this, like what's happening behind the scenes in this lab. Let's get out of here. Don't save that. I thought we had, oh shoot, it's not. I might have to go reopen the folder. I don't even remember where it is anymore. Well, don't worry about it. But the point is, in the background, I installed systat because it never was there before. But now in the newer version, because they updated us from Ubuntu 20.04 to 24.04, and now systat is a built-in package. So it's kind of funny to me that was never like that before, and kind of now it is. I got a question on YouTube. Hi, Scott. It's nice to see you. Do you have experience with Mitriok equipment? I've never even heard of that. Having lots of fun configuring from scratch to make it work. Let me see. I don't even. I've heard that name before. Somebody. Right, Mitriok. No, I have not played with these. What is this? Oh, I don't even know what that is. Is that like a little route? I don't. Hold on. I have not. Oh, is that micro tech? Is that like a play on micro tech? Yeah, I've heard of these, and somebody showed these to me before. I have not done anything with these. It does look like they got some cool training. It looks like there was a Udemy course on it. Unfortunately, I have not played with these at all. Okay. Best price per unit, gigabit port, 100 gigabit port. Okay. And they have QSF ports, which is useful. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I am a networking nerd, even though I don't directly work in networking anymore. I mean, I do it like on systems that have already been set up, and I do a lot of hardening of like layer 2 and 3 devices, which I've shown you guys how my Stig stuff works. But no, I haven't really played with that at all. No. Latvian company, and they make routers and very powerful OSs, router OS. Okay. Yeah, I know it looks. I mean, that looks super interesting and cool. I haven't had a lot of time to do. Like all my free time has been spent. Well, me and the wife went and saw the new Demon Slayer last night, so that was okay. If you guys are, if you're fan, this is what I was telling my brothers, because my brothers, I told them I went and saw it, and everybody's always like, "Is it good?" And I told the Discord this too, but I put a little spoiler on it. I'm not gonna spoil anything, guys. Don't worry. I don't like spoilers. I don't do spoilers. But I will tell you this: if you liked Demon Slayer, you will like it. If you just have watched Demon Slayer, but it's not your favorite type of anime, I don't think you're gonna like that movie at all. That's the best I can tell you. If you're like, Scott, I'm a fan of Demon Slayer, I love the way they do it, I think you're going to like the movie a lot. But if you're like, I like anime and I watched Demon Slayer because it was kind of cool, but it's not really my favorite thing, I don't think you're going to like that fucking movie at all. Because it's a long movie. And I always describe, like, I hate to be like this guy that always like refers back to old stuff, but I grew up on Tolkien, right? And if you guys know who Tolkien is, J.R.R., right? The guy who wrote The Lord of the Rings. Everybody knows who he is now. But when I was a kid, he just had these kind of popular books, and I remember reading them a lot as a kid. And one of the things I always remember was an Entmoot. If you guys know who the Ents are, they're those big trees. And then they get together, and they show them talking, but they don't really ever get into the like real crux of what he talks about in the story. But just for them to introduce each other takes a whole day. Just to do their introductions, because it takes so long. And they say this thing. They say, if anything is worth saying in Entish, you only say it if it's really worth saying, because in Ent it takes a long time to say things. And the reason that was always interesting to me is like that's how I felt about this movie, or that's how I describe something going very long, where you're like, oh man, I hope I really like it. Me and the wife like it, but I'm just telling you that's my assessment of it. D Pirate Roberts, what are we doing today? We're just doing Linux. I'm going through the book a little bit, and we're working on package managers right now inside of Ubuntu. I can't drop everybody in a Red Hat shell, or I would show them all about DNF and Yum and RPM and stuff. But we do have the books and stuff, the online courses that we do for free in the Discord show all of that stuff. So for people that are interested in that, I do more package and repo stuff than most people probably want. Because in the security course, I make you guys actually, where's it at? It's like configuration and drift remediation. I'm pretty sure. No, it's in system patching here. I make you guys do so much of that. Here, I'll show you the lab. Here's lab 5. Stigs, do some Stig view and stuff. And then we go in here and we actually start like writing our connections into the repos. And then does this one make you, yeah, this one actually makes you package your own repo up and give it out through HTTPD and then connect back into your own system. So you could then share that out to all the other servers in your area and have one server become the package manager for the whole environment if you wanted to. That's not something most people are ever going to do, especially if you're paying for like Red Hat and you have like a satellite server, you just let satellite handle it all. but that's something you might do if you're in an air-gapped environment, or you need to package up and bring something in and then deploy it to a bunch of servers. You might do something like that. So, all right, anyways, but we're over here on the lab. I'm talking a lot. And let's see, we're pretty much done. So it says use app to install packages that you need on the system, download the updates that the system needs, and then review and upgrade all the packages, and then verify everything's working. So these are actual tasks that an admin might do in an environment. Typically during like a patching window, you probably have a change management procedure to get here and this kind of stuff. But it says we're going to start a new project and you want to run Ansible in the lab environment. Install Ansible on your system. So real quick, let's just say, is Ansible on our system? I typed ANS, hit tabbed a bunch, nothing came up. I can say which Ansible. I can already tell you it's not there, but it's not there. Let's install Ansible on our system. Time-y install Ansible. It's right here. Or time app-y. And the -y just means it's not going to ask us anything. It should just accept everything. It should. Reason I chose Ansible, there's a few reasons. Number one, though, is it's a great tool. I love Ansible. I think I belong to the cult of Ansible officially. I have a bunch of labs on here that show you guys how to use the tool. We're starting a course next weekend that's on automation, and it's heavily going to be using Ansible. It's not only going to use Ansible, but it's going to heavily use Ansible. And the question here is, how long did it take to install? Now, the other reason I used Ansible is because it's got a lot of dependencies. There's a lot of things, so it took 51 seconds to do that deployment. But I say, what dependencies were installed? You only told the system to install one thing. You guys just saw me hit time app-y install Ansible. I said install Ansible. But Ansible needed to bring all his buddies with him to work, and I said go ahead and take the -y said go ahead and install all his dependencies. But now, why did it install those other things? Well, because it's not going to work quite right without them. We need these other things inside of Python for this to work. But I said, look at those get lines. Where did most of these packages come from? Where were we pulling these things from? Most of them were coming from... that's interesting. Where was it getting from? Here's the get. Was most everything coming from archive.ubuntu? Yeah, get archive.ubuntu. And then we can see where it was actually pulling from. And we should be able to see... I don't see it here, but we should be able to see what... Where's it at? Noble Universe. Noble Main. I thought it showed the actual repos, but I don't see the repos there. Noble Main, Noble Universe. Okay. That's fine. I say what information was kept in the log. So now we need to see what kind of information is there. And look, here's the thing. We only told the system to do this one thing. But if I had to guess, that's probably, I don't know, another 40 packages that were installed. Maybe a little less than 40, but maybe kind of close. It's about 3 per line. Yeah, maybe a little over 30 packages right there, right? Do you see all the packages that you expect from the previous command entered? Well, I see a lot more, but I'm going to have to assume that those were needed, right? There's also sometimes different ways you can install where there's a bunch of these that are sometimes recommended, and you can tell it to only do the required packages. So that can be like a soft and a hard requirement for packages. And some of these may not have been necessarily required, right? All right, so anyway, so that's cool. And then I say, do you see all the packages that you listed? Yes. Now you want to bring a system up to compliance by upgrading and updating all the software. So you put one package on because you needed it for some project. But now you've got a list of servers maybe that you need to package. You have to update everything. So check the current cache size and then clear it so that you have no cached packages. So we're going to clear the cached archives. There was 249 megs sitting there on our system. How much of the total system was that? We only have 20 gigs total. So 249 megs isn't that much of 20 gigs, but maybe we need to clean it up. And I've actually been on environments where our var cache was so small that like DNF had to be cleaned out each time. Kind of a hassle, but that is a thing that can sometimes happen. So we'll do apt update, and all this is going to do is go and read all the metadata information from the repositories that are configured out in the world. So there's a bunch of repositories that are configured. Our system, actually, it's kind of weird. Oh, I guess we'll go configure them next. But there's a bunch of repositories that come trusted with a system, and you can modify them from the beginning. You can turn them all off. I'm never going to update anything from any of you guys. I'm always going to update it for myself. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can configure your thing. So all our system did was go out to those trusted repositories that already existed on the system. They were either configured there, by the system as I downloaded, or they were configured by some other engineer in my team before I got here. So then we do apt update and we go pull all the metadata. We didn't do any updates yet. But what it did was it generated a list of what systems, like what we have on the system compared to the depackaged database. And it's going to compare what's upgradable. And it'll tell me right here, here's all the things that are upgradable. That's I can't count that. That's too much. So I'm just going to use the tool to count it for me. And I'm going to say list the upgradable, and then I'm going to do like a word count -L. And it says that it's about 200. So there's 200 things that want to get updated on the system. That's a lot, right? You can basically configure anything. Firewall is actually very similar to IP. Nice, Maxim. I've worked on a few different networking devices over the years where you actually can go in and configure them from like a Unix, Linux standpoint. And I actually like when you can do that because IP tables, pretty simple to understand, as is NF tables, which is what a lot of us use now for, we interact with that with Firewall D, right? So, yeah, that's cool. Maxim, I'll tell you, when I get a little more serious about the home lab than I even have been, I probably will be looking for a tool like that. That would be a good, that'd be a good one to have, because I will eventually have to partition the network up a little more than I do now. So, so then we could say, well, is there SSL and is there SSH in the upgradable packages? So my security team tells me, hey, we noticed that we have these new packages. We need to upgrade to SSH because there's some vulnerabilities. And I can go validate that I am going to get a new version of the SSH client. I am going to get a new version of the SSH server. And they are going to be at a further version than maybe whatever our vulnerability said that it was going to be. So that's cool, right? So we see our app list. And then I can just say, yeah, go ahead and update it. Just launch it, fire it over. If we were on a virtual machine, a lot of times we snapshot first. If we have the storage space to snapshot a lot of our servers, we'll do that up front just so that we could roll back if we need to. However, if you're updating a server and it's a physical box, that's a little more difficult. It looks like reset my environment. That's I think they have some limits now inside the system, so I might not be able to actually do this. That's interesting. It may crash, or that'll keep running in the background apparently. So we can let this run, and then it would be the same thing if I run this apt remove SAS assist. So it's there. So what I might do, is instead of watching that, I might do something like we could watch that process to see if that process still exists. So we might do while true, do maybe ps ef grep 44367. There's probably a few other ways to do this. We just sit here and look and wait for that thing to untrigger, right? So to go away, because it's still doing that in the background, right? It's still doing whatever it's doing in the background for that upgrade. See that? And we just sit here and wait for it to get done. And then how many free kilobytes of space were freed up by removing this tool? Oh yeah, we could remove sysstat if we wanted to. It doesn't really matter that much if we do. All right, so now DPKG and apt have repositories, and we can go look at those repositories that exist out there. So I'm going to stop that for now. We'll leave that running in the background. That thing will eventually clear out. But if I go into Etsy apt, and then I look for in Etsy apt sources list.d Ubuntu sources, so I'm looking through all the files that are in there, everything through the ubuntu.sources file, and I'm removing, grep-v will remove anything with a pound sign. Any comments, I just don't want them. And here's all I get back, is I'm having this archive Ubuntu and security Ubuntu, and that's where the main universe, restricted, and multiverse components were, as well as the noble security. So like, here's the things that our system was looking for. And again, these could have been configured by the system as you downloaded it. This was what was packaged with the system, or it could have been modified by some engineer before you get here. I mean, I don't always assume that I've built all the servers in an environment that I work in. Most of the times I do, because people make me build servers because I'm good at it, or that's something I've excelled at in my career. But let's say I haven't because I came in later. I think I've told some of you guys, like, I work for a company called Redline, and sometimes I just get dropped in on different environments to work on stuff. That happens to me. I'd say somewhat regularly, although now I'm full-time with NOAA, but that's NOAA. But sometimes I still get dropped in to help on different projects, and I have to like land and figure out what's going on, right? I have to figure out where this system's getting its updates from. Well before I ever did a package update on any real server. In a lab, I'll do whatever I want, but in a real server, I will go check this stuff and know what's coming down before I go messing around with anything. Because that's a long night to try to unscrew a package manager. You know, installing stuff or changing stuff in an environment, you do not want to be having to undo that. So it'd be like picking up a water balloon after it fell. You say, Scott, you can't pick up a water balloon, and I'd say, you're damn right you can't. Not if it popped. It's exactly what it's like when a package manager installs a bunch of stuff. There's no way to get. I mean, it's much better to just blow the machine away if you can and come back with a good. But then you have to have a good deployment process, right? Anyway, so here's another thing. We can go see where all the sources are defined. So in etc apt sources list.d, that Ubuntu sources is the only thing. So this is the only place right here that I would expect all these things to be turned on and working. All right. As of Ubuntu 24.04, this is now the default new location. Yeah, so that's changed, right? That's changed recently. And what I can do is I can add, so down in here, I can add, right here, in etc apt sources.list.d grafana.list, I'm going to add a new one. I'm going to allow my system to go get the Grafana packages. And I'm going to say signed by user share keyrings grafana.key. But if that's going to work, I need to go get that Grafana key. Well, actually, I think it'll go download it. But that's I thought I needed to. Oh, here we go. Yeah, here's me getting the key. So I'm going to go grab the key from Grafana. I knew I had to do it somewhere. Now, once I have this key, uh-oh. See if we can download that key. We should be able to pull that down. I don't know why that's taking so long. Maybe I might have went over. So I think they've added more, I want to say, security to the labs. I suspect what's happened is that I had gone over some kind of like bandwidth limits. I've never seen like an alert or anything, but like when we have two servers in one of these lab environments and we send a bunch of data back and forth with like iPerf3, like I've seen where like the lab will just stop working. I'm like, oh, they've got something in there, something to just keep us from passing too much data around. Okay, anyway, so there's that, and then I can do my apt update, and you'll see now when my system goes to check repositories, it's going to go check that Grafana repository. Remember earlier we saw that it just went and pulled a bunch of metadata. It doesn't actually do anything with apt update. But now look, oh, now it's got to connect over there and go get a bunch of information from app.grafana.com. And then now here's some packages that you couldn't see before, Promtail, and we can search for Promtail, and then we can show Promtail and see what's kind of going on in there. Hayes said the problem had an old job. It was impractical to build one of our systems from the ground up. There was no base state, essentially. Everything was shipped. Yeah, Hayes, I'll tell you, man. One of the hardest things in the world is, like, maintaining stuff that other people built, especially when it's like, yeah, it's working, but nobody knows how it's working, and then it just gets dumped in your lap, and it's like, it's almost like you're maintaining a sandcastle that somebody else built on a beach. And you're just like, how the hell am I going to maintain this sandcastle? The water's coming up and knocking it down every time. And they're like, oh, it's your response. You know, the manager just, I always joke around, but the manager pats you on the shoulder and goes, oh, and then just walks out. But that's what it's like, guys. Like, you are a fixer of things. You are a knower of things and a fixer of things. If you guys ever see my talk on, like, how systems administrators add value and systems engineers add value to a company. We know things and we fix things. Well, once they find out that you cast the Linux spells, they think you know everything. And now I tell you guys think I'm joking. I get called in on networking stuff. I get called in on storage stuff. I get called in on, oh man, all kinds of stuff that like, you're like, Scott, do you know this language? I'm like, I have never even heard of that language. Get in this call. That happens to me less now because I more get dropped in like in whole environments where there's just massive problems everywhere and just fucking leaks and steam. Like in one of like those horror movies, and there's just like steam and everything coming out of pipes, and I have to fix stuff like that. And it's like this is what we do, right? This is our lives as engineers. If we didn't want to solve puzzles, we probably would have been a salesperson or something. We would have just lied to people. You guys ever seen that thing that shows like how much you lie to people versus how successful you are in your career? It's one of my favorite little memes. So Hayes, final interview exam yesterday at the way, and I did well, and I was told I would have an offer waiting. Nice. Yeah, Hayes, I figured you'd land on your feet. I remember some of that other stuff going on that was giving you. On the plus side, hopefully you weren't too stressed, but you got to work on some of your music and stuff too. So that's kind of that's an important thing to be able to. Guys, as engineers, man, like we do again solve a lot of problems, so we do have to have a way to blow off steam, right? I tell all the guys in our Linux group, like, we're engineers first, and we work on stuff, but we also kind of play a little hard too, because like, people that just work with their brain all the time, that's hard work. Like, and you would think like, oh man, like, yeah, like maybe if it's not comparable to like working with your body. I mean, when I was a teenager, my uncle owned a roofing company. I've told some of you guys this, and I worked roofing my whole summers, my whole high school time, my whole time in high school. I did roofing in Phoenix in summer, so I did a lot of roofing as a kid, and that's and I mean, when I say roofing, it wasn't like my uncle owned the company and then we were up. My uncle owned the company, and it was like me and him and sometimes two other guys. We did all the roofing. There was no later on, like when I came back from the army, my uncle owned like multiple trucks and stuff like that, and he didn't have to get on roofs as much anymore. But that's not how it was when I was a teenager, right? So anyways, my point is different type of tired, right? But you still get tired working with your brain all day. You were too stressed to work on music, but pushed through anyways. Yeah. I get that too, right? Because I grew up with music, so that's an important thing for me too. All right, you guys might notice too, I don't normally drink green monsters. I normally do blue ones. Green ones are like 340 calories. They're like eating like 4 Snickers bars or some shit. So I won't normally do that. Okay. And I was a roofer in Phoenix. Yeah, Hayes. So then I tell people it's funny, like then I went in the army and everybody's like, Georgia's going to be hot in summer. I ended up going to Georgia through winter because I was an infantry guy. And I got there in September, so I ended up doing the whole winter there. So I never had to deal with like a real hot Georgia summer, but I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's terrible, but I'm pretty sure I also worked on roofs for like 10 hours a day as a kid. So I'm pretty comfortable. I get the difference between heat and humidity, trust me, but I mean, I've lived enough humid places for that too, but I just wouldn't compare them. They're bad. Yeah, see, I'm throttled in some way. This should have taken like a minute, but this definitely throttled. But I do like that it's throttled because it's letting us see, here's all the things it's doing. But is it going, it's going out to the app Grafana. Where's Grafana at? Has it, yeah. So we got the Grafana packages. These weren't there when we started this system up. When this lab started, those weren't there. But we added, look, we just made a file down here. So this right here just says deb sign. So we added a line. And then we t'd it out. So T will send it to the standard output of the screen. And we appended it, but really created, etc apt sources.list.d, grafana.list. So we added in that where we had sources.list before, now we have 2 files. And the other one, the one that we just made, is the grafana.list. So when this is done here, we'll be able to get it. Yeah, we're having some kind of massive like networking thing, probably because, again, we're getting throttled in some way. Yeah, Florida, and it's miserable, won't kill you. Yeah, I remember my senior year. It was my senior year of high school. I went to nationals for DECA because I was in DECA marketing club when I was in high school, and I went to my senior year national. I took 3rd in state my junior year, and I took 1st in state my senior year for DECA for marketing, like being able to talk to people. And it was super funny because I never could talk to people. I did Toastmasters in school, and I tell people all the time, Toastmasters is the best thing to get ready to present and talk about things and share ideas and stuff, because Toastmasters throws like a lot of like structured stuff at you to practice, but they also have a couple of like, I don't want to say they like come at you sideways, but they make you think a little bit on your feet a few times too. So like I actually was thinking about having us start a chapter. Oh, look, we configured. We didn't run out of space, but we had some problems in there. Anyway, so let me show you real quick. Etsy apt sources.d. Here's our Grafana. See, and we got 2 of them in there. That's probably part of the problem too. Let's just do this. It's because I did it twice in -A appends, but that's fine. Anyways, my senior year, we went to Florida, and I remember I went to Universal Studios. And so Florida, Universal Studios, hanging out in the park. And I remember standing outside, and they had like these little fans blowing on us, but it was like 95 with 100% humidity. But 100% humidity, but it wasn't raining, and it was fucking terrible. And I remember thinking, there's no way I wanted to cry, but I was like, am I already crying? Like, I'm so wet right now. And that was I was like 17 or something. So it was, yeah, because I graduated at 17, so I must have been 17 still. I just remember like this is like the hottest thing. So yeah, I hate the humidity as well. 10% of, yeah, so Phoenix is super hot, but at least it's dry. But I'll tell you, 2 times in my life I've seen a roofer do this, and I learned this very early on. You guys anybody here ever seen Alien 3? Alien 3 is where she goes to the prisoner planet, and the way they kill the alien, hopefully this doesn't surprise anybody, but they win. But at the end of so it's Aliens 3. She goes to this prison planet, and they get this alien super hot. They like pour this molten metal on it, and that doesn't kill it. He's still coming, and they hit him with the what's the really cold stuff? Whatever that really cold gas is. It's liquid nitrogen, and it freezes him, and he shatters, right? Because he went from hot to cold. I've seen this happen to 2 people in my life where they get done roofing, and one time it was off the roof, one time the guy did it on the roof, and people will pour like cold water over their head, and it shuts them off like they got punched behind the ear. You ever seen somebody get hit in the off switch and they just go out? Some people's off switch is on their chin, some's over here. Well, anyways, but when people go from hot to cold like that, it'll shut them off. And I've seen a guy fall off a roof because he poured cold water over his head, and and he was hot and just shut his body off. And it's weird. He was fine. He just fell off a roof. Surprisingly, ragdolling yourself off a roof doesn't always kill you, because you're ragdolled out and you're not all tense or whatever. But yeah. But no, it's actually a thing they teach you, is like you don't cool people off too quickly. You pour cold ice water over your head, or you dump your head in ice water, or you dunk down in. You can knock yourself out. It's kind of an interesting thing if you've been really hot. So anyways, all right. So let's search for Promtail real quick, and if our so we pulled all this metadata down. We didn't. Let's try it real quick. So I think we need to do our update again, because now we fixed our package manager, so it should go a little faster, I hope. I'm hoping. I mean, we're definitely like throttled in some way, and plus we're on the last 8 minutes of the lab, so maybe we went over our whole thing. But if this works, and if it downloads that information correctly and doesn't error out, then we would see the package Promtail ready to be downloaded if we wanted it. It's almost like these are all staged, and we know they're there, and we can choose the ones that we want, and then we'll download them. They are not staged in that we've downloaded them to our system. It would be an immense waste of bandwidth to just pull down all the packages to a system. In fact, so for people that haven't done a lot of like package management of large systems, we never, ever, ever configure. Like if I have 1,000 systems, like 1,000 Linux systems, I will never configure those all out to a repository out in the world. That is insanity. Because I would be pulling over my smallest pipe, and the smallest pipe I have is always my wide area network. Wide area network in this case is defined as the thing that I lease, the thing that I never own. Because like people guys, go in a networking class, go get in a networking group. People will argue all day about LAN and WAN and, well, this is a MAN and this is a this and that. For me, and I'm a systems engineer, I'm a network engineer too. For me, the wide area network is the thing I'll never own, the thing I'm always leasing, the thing that's a constant operational cost every month no matter what. The LAN is what I own. So passing data around on all these systems that are already just turning electricity into heat into my data center is always my local area network. But if I'm doing wide area network, pulling it through that small pipe that costs a lot more money per gig for sure, I'm never going to saturate that by pulling down to all my servers. I'm going to pull down to one stage, use that for my different test environments. And we're not necessarily getting into that now, but while this thing's taking its long time, I'll pull this up for you guys if you want, for people that want to see kind of what that looks like. If we go to Prologue presentations, we got to go up one, Linux admin course. What did I say? That was 5, wasn't it? Oh, whoops. That's automation course. Linux group. It's Linux admin course. When we did the Linux admin course, I think we said it was, no, it was security course. Hold on. One more. We'll get there. It's in Unit 5. Let's look at my presentation real quick. Yeah. In here, this is the configuration of a, damn it. Hate when it does that because then it always does that. Worst window managing system ever made. But where I'm going with this is how we patch in the enterprise. You're always going to pull down from one to one location. So vendor patches, whatever, you sync it down to one central patch management system, because now I'm downloading all those patches once. I'm not, and I'm freezing them in time. They are now frozen. I'm not taking patches out of the river of patches. The river of patches that are constantly coming into and out of a repository are a literal, I'm not saying this figuratively, I'm saying they are literally a nightmare. It is a nightmare to think I'm going to reach my hand out and over the course of like an hour get different patches for different servers. That would be insanity. I'm having a nightmare right now in my brain thinking about that. You have to come into one location and then you release these down into the different testing. And this was a talk that I did. This is from week 5 of the security engineering course. We went through this. We're not doing it right now necessarily. We're just kind of in a holding pattern on this. Grafana should have downloaded those. So then hopefully this one doesn't fail out again, but also we only have 4 more minutes in the lab. So maybe I can go here and maybe it still doesn't see it. Yeah, I probably had to get all the way to the end for it to commit it all, but our system's not under that much, but we can see information about all of it. Anyway, so look at you learning Linux. You use the tools of apt and dpkg to inspect current software in your system. So you looked at what was there. You figured out how to get a path forward. Again, I made these things up where like somebody came from the side and kept asking you questions. And because that's going to happen as an admin. You're going to get questions. You're going to get engineering questions. You're going to get all these kind of stuff. Do you want the... did I want the dub version? Are you talking about when I mentioned that we went to Demon Slayer yesterday? Me and the wife saw the new Demon Slayer yesterday. It opened yesterday in America. For anybody outside the U.S. that could see it before, probably could have found it ripped online too. But me and the wife went and saw that yesterday at like 2:30. So we went kind of... no, it's 3:30. Sorry, it was 3:30. It's pretty early in the afternoon. Still had 3 babies in there. Actually, it's funny. I had a baby literally sitting in the seat next to me. And it was funny because, like, a baby, probably almost 2. And the baby was surprisingly well behaved once they got him focused on the show. So, Robodom, how's it going? Hayes, yeah, my brother Tommy saw the new Naked Gun. He said it was really good. I've seen a scene from the new Naked Gun, and I was laughing my ass off. The bartender scene. So there's a nice little bartender scene that I laughed at. King Buns, how's it going? We're talking about package managers, and we're kind of looking at the book. This is a continuation of something I started last Sunday, where I'm just opening up the book. We're talking through a set of tasks, and I'm trying to kind of tie the physical stuff that we're doing, like the actual, what we would call procedural things we might do, into the way that like it works with the company. So I said, what other software tools were included by Systat? We saw a bunch of those. So when we did dpkg -L for Systat, we saw all of these other things. And maybe I grep down bin and I only want to see the ones that actually end up being put in a binary in some way. And Systat doesn't just have IOStat, it's got SIF-S IOStat. So this is IOStat, so we can see process. And actually, I've seen some pretty cool little labs that people have done on these to see IO of your file systems and stuff. MPstat, PIDstat, SAD-F, I don't even know what that is. And then TapeStat. Oh, you doing tape systems? I still run tape. You guys might be surprised. I still run tape systems at NOAA. Big data, LTO-8 tapes. People are like, oh, you can't get that much. Have any of you ever looked at like what an LTO-8 tape system can do? If you guys have never looked at tape systems or haven't looked at them lately, I assure you tape systems will blow your mind with their capacity. Here's the LTO-8 tapes, which have been around for quite some time. Their compressed capacity is 30 terabytes per tape. So a little tape that's, here's my phone. A tape is about that big, the top here, but it's thicker. So trying to find something in my general area that's like as thick as a tape. I have something over here, but I can't move it. It's my this is probably a little smaller than a tape. So tapes are a little thicker than this. This is my notebook. Actually, it's funny. This is my notebook from when I was in Iraq. I pulled this out the other day. This was my little notebook that I used to keep notes in when I was in the war. I keep writing stuff in there. I don't write anything in there anymore. I use my notebook's downstairs. Actually, my engineering notebook's downstairs. But look at this. So look at current tapes. So LTO-8s are what I still use, but that's from 2017. Look at these current tapes. Hold on. So the tapes that are right now. So LTO-10s have been out since May. They're 75 terabytes compressed in one of those little things. And more importantly, they fit really well with like a, so we have these layers before we get down to, people always think DR is just backing stuff up to tape, and that's not a full disaster recovery plan, right? Disaster recovery plans come after you do what's called a BCP, a business continuity plan. And a business continuity plan is superseded by another thing called the BIA, which is the business impact analysis, right? So business impact analysis is like, you got a guy like King Buns who comes in here who he runs a lot of like software stack and apps for his company, right? So business impact analysis for him isn't something like nobody's ever going to be like, how much inconvenience was it for us to have to call him to fix stuff? They don't ever care about that. What the business impact analysis of his stuff is what customer facing services are down if his app here is down, and what money is lost here if this app isn't responding, right? These are the things that a company cares about. So that's business impact analysis. And then it's like, how long can those suffer to be down? Can I only be down for 5 minutes? Well, if I'm down for more than 5 minutes, that's untenable for my company. So now we have to have a plan from that business impact analysis. We do our business continuity plan, which is, well, how do we get it back? Well, we call King Buns and we hope he gets it working in under 5 minutes. Well, you called him after it was down for 4 minutes, so he's got 1 minute to get the shit working. Guys, I'm not saying that's exactly real, but that's how companies kind of like fantasize about it in their head, right? So then business continuity plan is, well, we can't just wait on him. Or if we are going to just wait on him, we also need him to maybe have a procedure in case he got hit by a bus or he's out, trekking around in Colorado or something. We need to be able to call somebody else and they can follow along with his plan. I tell people this all the time, like as an engineer, your warranty of your work has to be such that you can take a vacation. And you say, what do you mean by that? Well, guys, I can have all layers of junior engineers under me. I have my whole, like in the last 10 years, I've always had junior engineers under me that get called before. It's almost like they're just this chaff before somebody gets up to being able to call me. Well, unless it's my on-call rotation, then I'm the first, but I digress. You have to get through all these other engineers to me, but here's the thing. If I didn't train them or I didn't show them or I left something undone, it always comes to me. This will be true your whole career. You be the smartest guy in the room, and if you can't figure that out, you're going to be the smartest tired guy in the room, because people are going to have to call you because you're not making little versions of yourself that can fix shit, right? And I don't mean necessarily the people. I'm saying like the procedures have to be good enough that somebody can follow along and do it. That loss of revenue, I've witnessed people fired for that one. Yeah, I'm sure. So guys, in the big hierarchy of things, right? People want to just jump. I know I'm showing tapes and stuff, and we're talking about whatever, but people want to jump just to, well, can I back it up, and then I can back it up, I can delete it, and I can restore it, and then they tap themselves on the shoulders like this, and they go, the system's up. Guys, that's not all of it, right? That's never all of it. Yeah. So if you don't want it called on vacation, write it for. Yeah, you have to. I tell engineers all the time, we guarantee our work. We guarantee our work good enough that we don't get called on the weekend, because otherwise you will be getting called on the weekend. That's all there is to that. Especially the more, like, everybody wants to make more money, but one of the bad things about making more money is there's more things tied to you. There's more things you're responsible for. In fact, a lot of people, I don't want to call anybody out specific, but one of the other engineers that's here, he's up for kind of like a promotion to like a more senior or even principal type role. And one of the things that's almost always tied to that in an organization is, are you managing or maintaining something? And some even are like, have you generated other things from your thing that you're managing or maintaining that are also critical to the business? But yeah, if you're not maintaining something that's like critical to the business, some businesses don't even consider you for that kind of promotion. You have to, like, I don't want to say you have to be making the company money, but you have to be like actively part of like the revenue stream. And it sucks. I mean, it sucks that that's true, right? I mean, but it's also true that, like, you could find 100 of me if I'm just the guy that bangs in nails on a roof and gets the roofing done. You can find 100 other guys that can do that, but you know, we want to be more valuable. NTP's misconfigured. Yeah, if you have any type of, man, I sometimes talk about time problems and stuff. What's going on here? Anything else going on in the home lab? No, the lab's good. All right. So we ran out of time on the lab, but that I think this lab is good as like a high level going into packages and stuff. This wasn't designed to like teach you everything about all the other stuff I was talking about, but we do have stuff that'll at least familiarize you with that. Yeah, LTO tapes are wild. So let's go back then, and let's go to, we didn't go through all of these, but I think that's fine. Let's go look at configuring NFS in a system. So sometimes people think NFS, that's an old technology. Nobody uses NFS anymore. And I would tell you, NFS is way more prevalent than you probably want or ever would have thought it could have been. NFS is wildly popular for base server configurations, static files, that kind of stuff within a company internally. Sometimes there's big tools called Isilon, or who are other vendors? What's that one vendor that's real big? Everybody always loves them. I don't know. They must have great salespeople. NetApp? Is it called NetApp? Yeah. And then they'll sell your managers this big appliance, and then they'll just carve it all up into a bunch of NFS shares, and they're like, "That's awesome." And you're like, "All right, cool. I can support NFS." So this is going to be a lab about kind of setting up NFS in your environment. And here's kind of the thing we're going to do. We're going to build an NFS server and client and verify its functionality. That's fine. Given a bash prompt and 2 servers, complete in the allotted 60 minutes of time. And then we're going to complete all the activities in the lab and have NFS communication between the server and the client. That's our goal, right? Over here on the left, it says your team has determined they need an NFS share to facilitate file system access across multiple servers from one central location. We're going to deploy NFS on node 01, so we're going to put a server over there. We're going to share out a file system, and then we're going to verify that it's shared out. That's the first part. Then we're going to connect into it. Over here, I say, why do you now have 3 NFS packages when you only told the system to install the NFS server kernel package? This actually probably makes sense in context of what we just did. So let's see what the lab says to do. We'll go over to node 01, SSH over there, and we're going to look for NFS. I don't see it on the system. We're going to install this one server, NFS kernel server, but look at all these little dependencies that get put on there, and all that crap. And I say, why do you now have a bunch of NFS packages when you only told the system to do one? Well, the reason for that is because there's dependencies. There were also a bunch of other things that were installed as well. But yeah, we only wanted the server, but we got the client as well. And we also got this ID map, which is useful if you have some kind of third party and you're mapping users and UIDs, right, to stuff. And then I say, you know, let's go ahead and check, is our NFS server on? Looks like it was turned on by default. Okay, that's cool. That's good. And I did a show mount -e, and I'm not exporting anything. Well, that makes sense. I didn't set anything up yet. All I did was turn a server on. The server is defined as some service out there. It's listening on port 2049, which is a common port that needs to be open, both for TCP and UDP for you to be able to connect. And I see right here that it is listening on any IPv4 address, and it is listening on any IPv6 address. That's what those are. This is analogous to any IPv4, and that is analogous to any IPv6 right there. And by the way, there's our port that's listening to right here, 2049. Okay, good. So we're listening to anything trying to come in on those ports. And then I say, let's just make sure the firewall's off. Firewall's inactive. The firewall is running though. Like if I did a systemctl status UFW, the firewall for this Ubuntu box is ready to work, but it's not turned on. It's in an inactive state. So that means there's nothing actively applied to any of the interfaces. Could we turn something on? Absolutely. Have we for this lab? No. We do in other labs. We turn stuff on. And I'm going to make a share, and I'm going to cause that share to be owned by nobody and no group. Reason we're doing that is because then when we write things in there, they can be written by other users. If we had left it as root, then we would have to give it open permissions, and we're just going to set it to nobody and no group because that's how people are going to connect in anyways. So it's good. And then we're going to go ahead and add a line to our etc exports file. So we're going to vi etc exports. We're going to hit Shift G to go to the bottom, O to go to a new line, and then we're going to add in this line right here, which is to share out. We're going to share. There's share. We're going to allow anybody from any network to connect to it. We can limit that down. In fact, this happened lately at work where we had to lock some stuff down. We're going to allow read-write. If we don't allow read-write, if we make it read-only, it can be a read-only configuration. This is a very common way to do configurations inside of systems where you've got a vast amount of systems and you just want to have an NFS share out there that's read-only that allows like environment files to be read and stuff. Very, very common and popular way of kind of doing that. We can allow sync or no sync here and then no subtree check. I'll let you go read it. I think I have it in here where you can go dig in on a whole bunch of other things if you want. There's like hundreds of things you can do in NFS. And we're just going to go ahead and copy that and use that right there. Now real quick, before we do anything else, let's go do, we've created inside of our etc exports file the share for the file system. NFS is running, and the question I would ask you to think about is that now exported? We've updated the file. Is that that file that we just made exported on our system yet or not? And why not, right? Let's go ahead and hit show mount -e. I don't see any mount points mounted or mountable. Show mount -e is a pretty good one. You can also do, there's another one people use, export. Right, you can use export FS. I don't see anything exported. You could use export FS to start the export, but we're not. Why isn't it, just because I changed the config file, why is it not, I've changed the config file, I should be happy. Why is it not coming up? Why is it not actually being shared out to the world yet? Well, we need to restart that service. And the restart of that service tells it to go back. Yeah, it tells it to go back and reread its config files. The way I kind of explain this often to people it would be like if I had 2 copies of a shopping list and my wife took the one copy and went shopping, and then while she was out shopping I was like, oh, I'm getting real snackish, and I start writing a bunch of snacks on my copy of the list. Well, she's out running in memory. She's out running in the real life at the store with the list that she's got, and I'm writing stuff on my list, and then when she comes home she doesn't have the stuff, and I'm like, oh, I don't get any of my snacks. Well, that's, if I called her and said, hey, I've sent a new picture of the list with the new stuff in the end, do you mind getting that stuff as well? Then she can either curse me out or do it, right? No, I'm just kidding. But she would probably do it, and then that would be like reloading. But the point is, and this was a design decision long ago, Linux systems you could write an app that goes and constantly checks its config file, But the problem, there's a danger there. What if I had hit save when that thing was only... What if I did save when this was only written to like here, and I was still thinking of other options to add or whatever, and then that system comes along every minute and reads it? Now I've got a busted system. Or I have to handle that. Some systems are pretty smart. Like if you ever do something with like, what are some systems that are real good with that kind of stuff? They just ignore the other stuff. Telegraph's a tool that does that. Telegraph will just, it'll read in what it can and just throw out all the broken shit. And it'll tell you it's broken and if you go look at it, but it'll still run the stuff that did work. I think Telegraph's a real good service for that. It's one that I've seen personally do it. SMTP isn't, but Postfix I think is, where it'll just ignore things. It's like, I don't know what that is, and it just throws it out. But there's some robust error checking that has to be happening for that to work, where it still reads the rest of the file. And even then, I can almost 100% guarantee you, even if you get past the syntax problem, which some of you guys know, there's 3 levels of computer science problems, errors, right? The syntax is only the first one. The next one is the runtime error. Maybe it does or doesn't work in a runtime environment later. What if I didn't have my no root squash on there, or my root squash on there that I wanted? So now I have a security violation, but I'm running. And then the last one is the logic error, right? There's three levels of error for all computer science problems, right? There's syntax errors where the computer's like, what are you talking about, buddy? There's runtime errors where it's like, let's send it, buddy. And then but then the runtime errors, by the way, are like, then the variables aren't there or something isn't there because in the running state the system doesn't work right? Like variables aren't being populated and that kind of stuff. You see that with runtime errors. And then logic errors are, it's like, system looks clear, buddy, system's running, but you are not logically getting what you wanted, right? Those are like your 3. Anyways, let's keep going. I'm going to exit that, and I've got a working system over there. Now let's build our side of it on control plane that's going to do that last little part, which is connect, right? So you set up an NFS server. Now we want to connect. So we're going to install the client on this one. And after we install the client, we're going to connect over to that share, that exposed file system, and we're going to mount it on our local machine under MNT. Not most of the time are you ever going to mount something directly on MNT, but for a lab for testing, no problem. So mount node 01 share, right? That's the end of the definition of the node and the start of the file system. That's what that colon denotes there. And we're going to mount it locally on /MNT. So it might be useful to see this. Right? So here it is minus the container stuff. And we don't see /MNT anywhere here, right? Does everybody agree? Yes. Let's mount it, and then let's rerun my command there. And now here's /MNT mounted at the bottom. By the way, this is like a down in the weeds sysadmin trick that you won't pick up unless you're doing admin work. But did you guys know that mount, the command mount, when you actually run it, df isn't exactly this way, but mount is. If you ever use the mount command, I don't really want to grep. I'm just going to use mount by itself. Mount will always show things in the order that they were mounted. This is kind of nice because it's reading from the etc m tab, and the m tab is populated at the bottom. So you say, well, what the heck are you talking about, Scott? The last thing that was mounted on the system for sure was this. And you might say, Scott, why is that important? Well, what if I go to a bunch of my servers and one of them's acting funky, and I know that some other admin was working on it yesterday, but now he's on vacation and we can't get a hold of him. He's traveling to Europe or something, who knows? And I go to this server and I expect all the things that are mounted, like all the file system stuff, to be mounted up here at the beginning because they were working, right? And somebody says, hey, yeah, I think yesterday when I talked to him on the phone, he said he was going to remount that file system. Well, what if I see the server's been up for 10 days and I still see that file system up here and it's not at the bottom? I know he didn't remount that file system yet. I don't have to even go through the history to know that because it's still up here. But if the file system happens to be down at the bottom of the list of mtab like this, I know that he remounted it at some point. It's been remounted some point since the initial system setup. I can't say for sure it was yesterday, but I can say for sure it was remounted Now I can go into history, and there's other things I can do to start forensically going. But one of like my sanity checks when I look at servers and I'm looking for one thing that's different, I'll look to see if anybody's mucked around with mounts. And this one's kind of a mess because look at all these container D bullshits. You're not going to track down container D stuff like this. Like if you're running Kubernetes on a system, you better have some other good monitoring in place for this stuff because this stuff's so ephemeral. These nodes could be all these things could be gone in a few minutes and come back. We wouldn't even. It'd be so impossible to track that. You'd have to have some other tool doing it. But where I'm going is I can tell you for sure that this came up when the system came up here, and then I can tell you for sure other things got mounted later. So this is like one of those things, like again, deep in the weeds. You'd only see this if you had been working on Linux systems for a while. So mount always shows things in the order they were mounted. It's true. So df-h mount shows us that it's mounted from this other system over here, and then we can touch a file in there and see that the file's there with nobody and no group. Then we can umount it, and we can do that same thing again. We can do that ls-l mount, and there's nothing in there because now we've disconnected, and it's sitting over on that other file system. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make that persistent. So you see that we mounted and unmounted things. You can do that in a file system in general, but if this server were to have rebooted, this little command right here would not persist through a reboot. This right here will be gone on a reboot. It would look like this. It would be gone. He would be back mounted off the normal file system. So how do we make them persistent? How do we make that something that persists in an environment through reboots and stuff like that? Well, we go in here with etcfs tab. There's other ways that this is actually done nowadays, but there's these sets of files that I think I can just click this and copy and then right click in here. Yeah. So there's files now. We do the .mount files inside of sysctl. But it's funny, if you ever go write one of those and then you do a daemon reload, it actually just writes its values down into etcfs tab anyways. So all right, so that's there, right? And then one of these old kind of sysadmin tricks to do here is instead of remounting it like this, we know that this works. But if we want to check our syntax of our etcfs tab file, if we kind of like want to lint our syntax a little bit, it's not really a lint, it's just a check. We're going to run it. We're going to do a mount-a, and it says, there's an issue there. However, hold on. Let's go to df-h mount, and that has been mounted properly. But they also tell us, look at this. It's been modified, but systemd wants you to reload it. So that's an interesting behavior that's, I don't want to say newer, but definitely in the last few years. And then we can just touch a final mount check, and then we see it, and then we should be able to check, and our lab will tell us that we're done. So it's like kind of good. Leith, what did you say? You said mount. Let's see. Mount column -t. Whoops. It would help if I could type. Column. Yeah, that does kind of look nice. So it's a little more visible. Now you got to remember we're also looking at these huge overlays that would not normally be. Let's do it over here, right? Yeah. That's a little nicer to look at too, and it might even be a little wider, right? Right, and then you can kind of see a way to see these differently, right? And everybody's got their own way that they like to see stuff in a terminal. Most of us like to see things, if we can, without a wrap. But this one's not going to be, unless I shorten the terminal, we're not going to see this without a wrap. But that's kind of nice. Yeah, it's not bad at all. Yeah. That's in a system without a bunch of container D stuff mounted, right? Which we could put on there if we wanted to. Okay, so we did that, and I said, why didn't share get immediately shared? Well, we talked about that. When you create a file on the share, why is it not root as you would expect? Is that behavior configurable? Yeah, we're doing a root squash by default, but we can do a no root squash as long as the server accepts it. And then I said, why is it so important to verify that your etcfs tab is good using a mount-a? Well, one, it sanity checks you that you didn't do something stupid. And two, if your etcfs tab is busted and you reboot a server, that server might not come back up. You might have to go into a rescue mode, comment that out, reboot, do a switch root, make it readable and writable. Well, it's always readable. You make it writable and modify it and then reboot your system to get it back up and then go figure out what you did wrong. What's better is to do it this way and make sure it's going to mount properly. Then it won't muck up the boot, because booting is one of the worst places to have problems like that. But if you know you were modifying an etcfs tab and then you rebooted a machine that didn't come back up, that would be the first place you'd go fix anyways. So I come down here and say NFS is not the fastest type of storage available to Linux systems. What are some reasons to use NFS? Well, we use NFS, or like up in AWS, it's called elastic file storage. We use it to share out typically like flat static files. Like config files are great out of NFS. We use it to store things that don't change and aren't programmatically accessible. Programmatically accessible things tend to be hit via they're typically like object storage, and we use like APIs to call them and retrieve values and stuff. But what are some of the industry use cases? You can find white papers or blogs on how people are using NFS in the industry. I use NFS for static config files across tens of thousands of servers. That's what I do. When everybody needs to quickly read something and get it to see how they need to be configured, NFS is king of that. It's cheap and it works and it's good. People will use NFS for just, configuration of storage of systems. A lot of times people's home directories will be in NFS, because you'd be surprised how much stuff inside of your home directory is actually just sitting there all the time. Once your environment's built up, unless you're doing like heavy dev work in your home environment, you're probably not doing a lot out of your home. And even if you are, and I have a fair amount of users on Noah that do stuff out of their home, you're probably still storing that stuff in operationally scratch spacing over in one of our faster file system types. So NFS works great even for home directories and stuff. And it makes it really nice, because here's the thing: when you have NFS mounted home directories, when you're Scott on this server, you're also the same exact Scott on that server and that server and that server and that server. And it doesn't matter where you go, you're always the same home directory for your user. And that's super useful. So NFS gets used like that for a lot too. I said cloud providers use a version of NFS up in the cloud. They're called file storage. So there's 3 types of storage typically for people that want to know, maybe you want to be a cloud architect one day or something. There's block storage. Block storage are devices that are slapped on the side and data are read in chunks or blocks from those devices. Block devices are sometimes found in dev. So in dev, you've got a bunch of block devices here. And typically, well, there's blocking character devices on the Linux side of things, but when we're talking about them from the outside, we tend to think of them as block devices being connected, right? And then there's also file systems. So when we just attach like a network file storage of some type, that is just attached as a file system, and now you're reading things as files. And it looks, for all intents and purposes, CD to MNT here, and it looks like just a file system on my machine, but it's not a block device that's connected. I'm accessing this as a network file storage, right? And then the last type of storage that's very common is what's called object storage. In Azure, they call it blob storage. Well, blob storage is a type of object storage, right? But object storage is where we use an API to call for a location, and then we get a block or an object of data back, and then we can do whatever we want with it. Typically information that comes with that, like metadata information that comes with that block or blob or object or whatever you want to call it, is, I shouldn't use block because block is already a type of storage, but that information that comes back, we get a bunch of metadata on it as well, and we typically read that out in like JSON or something. And that's programmatically how most people read and deal with data and that kind of stuff, especially up in the cloud, is they use object storage. So that's kind of the way, those 3 things are kind of the ways that we deal with connecting data to our servers in general. But NFS is a super convenient way. Any of these network file storage type things. By the way, up here I'm talking about NFS as an actual individual technology, and down here I'm talking generically. We're talking generically about network file storage of some type, right? As like a type. Anyways, all right. Let's go look at Apache server. So there's another lab. These are all labs you can do with me. I'm not just up here talking. You guys can do labs with me if you wanted. Where's our? Here's Apache. Oh, can I back up for a second real quick, because we're getting into the automation course next week. People are gonna start that with me. If you were like, well, Scott, that was cool, but that was just like, man, that was real fucking. There was no automation there at all, buddy. And I'd go, you're right, buddy. Did you know that we can automate all that? All the stuff that I just did right there was prone to me fat fingering. You saw me modify a file directly at CFS tab, and it's like, ooh, brother, what is that? Like, I don't. Ugh, you manually did that? That's gross. What if I showed you right here that we could go do that same thing in Ansible? So I'll show you guys. This will be a quick little taste. This is also a different part of the book. If this is the book from LeanPub that we have. If we went down to the Ansible stuff, right? And what is this? This is lab 18 of Ansible. So I come down here to 18. And it said if you were going to do the NFS, if you were going to do this NFS deploy with us, I linked that to you guys good. How might it look if I wanted to take all those things that I just did manually and do them automatically, so that one server could quickly become the server and all my other servers could become clients to that server? I'd tell you, it's not this easy, but it's close to that easy. You know, they say 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. What was I just watched a movie. Oh, what was that? Oh, I just rewatched, what was it? It had Bruce Willis in it. Pulp Fiction. Anybody here ever seen Pulp Fiction? He said something like, he said to the girl, he's like, I'll be back before you can say something. And she said it, and he's like, okay, not that fast. And then, because she was like, I don't know, she was sad that he was going to do some bullshit. So Ansible Galaxy is kind of like a bunch of repositories, Katie. Ansible Galaxy is like, I use Ansible Galaxy to generate my own roles when I'm doing role inheritance. And I actually have some stuff with Ansible Galaxy later. But no, so let's think of it like this. Ansible is the tool. It's an automation tool. We can look at what it does here in a second. And we're going to look at what it does here. But Ansible Galaxy is like a very specific function of that tool to build roles that then could be used as part of the tool. So Ansible Galaxy is like a function of it. I've seen people use Ansible Galaxy like a GitHub, but I don't. I mean, and you need to have Galaxy in the newer Ansible automation platform. I remember we deployed that at AAA, me and my brother, a few years back when I was back over there. We redeployed with, now you had to have a 4th server. You had to have 2 servers, and then we had 4 servers total, and then we needed a 5th server. So there's this other server that has to be separate. Super annoying. We couldn't combine it, and it had to function as the Galaxy server, and I thought that was stupid. But just because I didn't see a need, like, not everybody, even big environments, not everybody needs multiple different execution environments inside of everything. Hold on real quick, guys. I'm gonna grab some water real quick. Give me a second here. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back. I'm gonna grab some water. Ow, ow, ow. I went hiking this morning, so my legs hurt. Got my water bottles. This thing says, you deployed an NFS server by hand over and configure NFS share. So that links you back to that other lab. And it says now your team needs to deploy the NFS server to multiple places. And you don't want to do it by hand for a couple reasons. 1, you're lazy and want to watch Netflix. 2, you don't want to make mistakes. We call that fat fingering. We talk about it also, like, the more people are watching you, the more you're going to make mistakes typing. Have anybody here ever had 3 other engineers looking over their shoulders, and you're like, oh shit, can't type? As more people that are, and we joke around about it, it's like the more people watching you type, the more mistakes you make. It's always true. So right here I say we're going to check a few things, and then we're going to go push this out. So let's cat our host file. I don't make you make the host file, but in this host file we've got an inventory, servers, and the servers have this designation here with a variable of if they're client or the server. So node 01 is going to become the server, and control plane is going to become the client. Now, just real quick, I know this is going to be silly for some people, but I'm still going to say it. what if I had 30 other clients that I needed to call, and they were control plane 1 through 30, and I needed to put them either on this line or in multiple lines, right? There's variables that we could use. I don't expect you to know that. But do you think, like, if as the simplest thing ever, do you think you could turn this into a file that would have control plane 1 with the variable client all the way through control plane 30 with the client? Does anybody think that that would be a hard thing for them? And I hope all of you go, no, Scott. Like, hopefully you go, I'm already smarter than you, Scott. That's fine with me. But could you go and make this, right? Just modify it all the way down or generate it. There's plenty of other ways to do it, but could you do that? Yeah, and actually, you could do this inside of Ansible. I did not expect anybody to know that you could do that inside of Ansible as well. But let's just say you didn't know that, and let's say right now we don't need that. My point is, everything from any automation tool, and this is something I'm really going to hammer in the course, comes from a proper inventory. If you can't get your inventory right, you can't do the rest of the stuff right. But on the other side of it, inventories are relatively easy. Oh, sure, you can make them real complex, and you can give yourself nightmares and headaches up and down the board, but inventories in general are the base of how all this stuff works. All right, so anyways, we come down here, and we cat out our root host, and then we're going to make a directory for root Ansible roles. So if I pwd real quick, I'm down in root Ansible roles because I went down in there. And I'm going to generate, real quick, if I ls in here, there's nothing in here, right? Do you guys see this? There's nothing up my sleeves. I'm not doing anything sneaky. I'm not hiding anything. There's no cards that are going to pop out. I'm not doing any magic here. And I'm going to run Ansible Galaxy init to generate 2 inheritable roles for me here real quick. So watch, they're going to generate. And then sometimes, and I tell you guys this, I very rarely use the tree command, but I really want to run the tree command. Oh, I don't do it, show you here. I don't think I have tree on here. Can I just tree this? Yeah, I don't have tree. app-y install tree. Let's just put it on real quick so you guys can see this. I want you guys to see, we had nothing in this directory, and then I used Ansible Galaxy init twice and made 2 things. And that was the directory structure that was created for me. It is everything inheritable inside of NFS client as a role that I would need. But you know what's actually funny about this? Almost all of this stuff is extra. But what I really need, the only thing I need is tasks main. That's the only thing I strictly speaking need. I need a place to execute my tasks out of. In a playbook, it executes individual tasks, which are module calls, right? That's what I need. But sometimes I use some of these other things, and it's kind of nice because then I can reuse NFS_client anywhere else later. Once I've made it, as long as it's loosely coupled from other things, I can use it anywhere else. Okay, so let's go down and we're going to copy in an NFS deploy that I already made. And let's cd up one and go look at this NFS deploy. NFS deploy is going to go to all the nodes that I call out of my inventory, which is control plane and node 01. It's going to gather facts on them, sure, whatever. And then that's going to be an initial connection attempt. We can also turn that off, but we're not going to. And then down here, there's 2 roles. A server is going to go, and it's going to try to apply this role. If he's the type server, he's going to get this role applied to him. If he's the type client, which are the only 2 we know of right now, if he's any other type but server, he's going to skip this. And then down here, if he's any other type but client, if he's client, he's going to get this one. And if he's anything other than client, he's not going to get this one. So you might very quickly, astutely say, well, Scott, you only have servers and clients right now. Well, what if I add in a third one called, I don't know, broken state? I don't know, fucking who cares what it's called? Would it get either of these? The answer is no. It can only be server or client to get the ones. Anything else is irrelevant. Does that make sense? In fact, technically I can run this right now and it won't break because there's nothing to execute, and Ansible would just go, you told me to run, I gathered facts on all your hosts, and then I didn't do anything. In fact, I could do that real quick. I could just come down here and I can just run it. And it'll be like, you didn't tell me to do anything. I didn't have to inherit any roles. Like actually, technically the servers did still inherit the roles, but there were no tasks in them, so it didn't do anything. Now let's go put something in each of those. So I'm going to copy those in. In fact, they're already written. We're just going to go copy them in there, right? And then let's go look at one of them. I think this one here. We'll go look at the tasks main. Actually, let's just cats both of them out. So here's the one for inside of NFS server as an inherited role. I say deploy the NFS server kernel latest. This is the same thing that we did as by hand. We went to node 01 and we did app-y install. And then we created a share. Same exact thing we did, except we did make dir share, and then we did a command that said chown, and then we did nobody : no group against the file. You guys remember doing that if you were here a few minutes ago? And then we went to etc exports and we added a line in that looked just like that. Now we're just doing it in Ansible. Then we did another thing. We had to restart NFS, but Ansible, you can always restart NFS. I could have a command under here that did systemd. It would be the system, not systemd module. I think it's system module. And it would reload that. And it would do it every time no matter what. And we'd be happy. However, I don't want to restart NFS on any system unless, only if we have only if we have the condition where we've changed something in etc export. So notify only notifies a handler if something has changed, if the output of this is anything other than okay. Well, okay and failure and unreachable wouldn't matter, but only when changed happens here does this work. So that's the only one. And then we go look at this other one and it says here's the handler. So here in that same one, handlers, here's the handler where it'll say state is restart. Oh, it is systemd. That's my bad. And then for NFS server, this handler only gets called the first time we do this because that's the only time this gets changed. That's the only time it needs to restart. That right there is a condition of what we call a thing called idempotency. When people start talking about the cult of Ansible and they're like, you guys are a bunch of cultists. You guys use this tool for F and everything. Yeah, because I can keep laying this tool over an environment. I can make this thing run in the environment every minute. It's never going to restart that service unless something changes here. This service will never get restarted again. It's completely an idempotent value. We could just keep running it. Nothing changes. Idempotency is a mathematical term for when you multiply two matrices and a value doesn't change. It's said to be an idempotent value. It means it doesn't change through multiple reruns. That's what it means to us, right? That's why it's used. But I'm going to execute this play. And watch. Only one thing. You didn't see me do the other side. You didn't see me build the client part yet. Client part's still sitting out in the cold. Now it's going to skip the node for the client because one, we don't have the client, so it wouldn't really matter. And two, I wanted you to see that this isn't broken just because the client doesn't have any configuration. It's just it won't do the client part yet. It did the server part. So then I do a show mount -e, and I see that he is technically mounting what he needs to. But now we come over here, and we're going to do the client side by running the same command, and the server stuff doesn't have to change, so it doesn't get restarted. It's the reason this cult following exists for Ansible, is it's such a powerful tool. Let's go copy that over, and then let's look at it. And all it's going to do is on this system, we're going to install NFS Common. And then we're going to use the mount module. And the mount module is super powerful. Remember all those things we had to change earlier? Like we mounted and tested. We didn't have to do that. But then we had to change our etcfs tab, and then we had to mount -a, and we had to do all these other things. This is going to automagically, if we will, go add these values into our etcfs tab. And then it's also going to mount that as it does it. So this module is going to do all those things. Let's rerun our playbook. You're going to see it try to, but also skip over everything on the server side because the server stuff's done. You will not see the handler run on the server because the handler doesn't have to get notified because there was no change, and that's the exports. Remember, this had to change for the handler to occur. That's what you saw up here. It changed, and then the handler was called. Now it didn't change, no handler. Now we installed the client stuff, and that's all working. So now if we go test, is that here? It is in the etcfs tab, and it is mounted on the box. But look at how it was mounted on the etcfs tab. Is that the way that we would kind of expect to do it? We might have cleaned it up a little bit, but that's a functional mount command, or a mount add to the etcfs tab. And then I say check, and then boom, look at you learning Ansible. You use Ansible to deploy NFS server and client via Ansible playbook. Now, if that seems like a lot, right? If you're like, that seems like a lot of stuff, I don't really understand. all of these tasks were just done by hand in that other lab. Now I gave you a way to do that and deploy it against all those servers without having to do it by hand, without having to risk the fat fingering of things. And then now I could take this and put this anywhere, and as long as I had my properly defined values coming in from my inventories, I could do this everywhere. We could also modify this. In fact, we'll do this in the Ansible course that's coming up, or the automation course that's coming up. Instead of me just generically doing, where do I have it? I know for sure we did that command. I don't know why I don't see it. Did I clear the screen? I probably hit clear on the screen at one point, and now it's not showing it. Yeah, but here, like when we're exporting here and we're just using share, we can modify this. So this line right here that's being created, we can modify this to be, we're going to use something called like a loop, and we can loop over an environmental file. So an environment file can be given. You could tell me, hey Scott, could you modify this NFS server so that in my environment it shares these 7 files out, these 7 directories to my systems? And I would say, yeah, we just give me an environment file. Environment file should come in some type of either YAML or JSON. YAML is probably my preferred way of doing it. That's the way that we'll say that they gave it to us. And then we would modify this to loop over that variable right here. And then 7 times it would change right here. It would change that file and keep adding those lines. And then when it was done, it would still only notify this once. And then it would go. And then if you said, could you add another file later? Yeah, give me another file. We would add it, and this is additive. This won't delete the old ones unless you can do some other stuff to clean that up if you want. And then it would only restart if it changed at least one thing. If it kept going over and there were now 8 things and they didn't have to change any because you had already fixed it on your one test server, this would blow over the top of that test server and not restart the NFS there. It's such a good tool for that kind of stuff. And I joke around about the cult of Ansible a lot, but it's like, that's why your friends that use it and stuff are always telling you to use it, is because it makes adminning and engineering of an environment, like, I don't want to say simple, but it's much easier, right? We can get this tool just doing all of our dirty work for us while we watch Netflix or something. All right, so anyways, so that was our NFS deploy. In the NFS deploy YAML, what happens in the roles and how are they determined, how they apply to each system. We have conditions. Those conditions were found here. And if the type was server, it gets the server role inherited. If it was client, it gets the client role inherited, right? There are a bunch of ways to do role inheritance. I'm not going to get into all of them because I focus on the thing. Like I tell you guys, once I have a way that works, I kind of stick to it. But are there other ways to do role inheritance? Absolutely. Have I seen other ways that work fine? Sure. This is the way that I do it. Works just fine. Sometimes I do it based on the name of the server. And if all the servers are in an environment are of the same type of name for each type, and then we have all kinds of stuff we can do. Lord Processor said, I am looking through this course, Network Automation Engineering, specialized by Cisco. Do you think it will be perfect for someone who has not skills in networking and needs a job? I mean, I don't know. Like, Lord Processor, I would tell you if you want to get into network engineering, right, and you want to learn how to do that stuff and get heavily in there, what I would tell you to do is, one, if the course is free, take it for sure. If you're paying for it, make sure it's something that you've already kind of worked on and are sure you want to do. But I would also tell you this: if you can get into Cisco, if you're using GNS3 or any of these different tools where you can get into like a Cisco command line, I would also probably tell you to Lord Processor. I would tell you to get in there and just make sure that you want to do networking. Like, do some command line stuff. Maybe modify some networks, build some networks. I would do the basic CCNA like objectives list. Right, there's these objective lists out there, and I've pulled these up and showed them to people before. I always grab these things out and I drop these directly into like Notepad++. And I have these in, if you go to our Discord, look, there's an event starting up in 26 minutes for people that want to go do Bash with the group. The Bash study starting for people that want to do that. That's a pretty popular group. Hold on, I think I have it down here in meeting notes. Let's see if I have Cisco. I know for sure I've put these notes up here before. for people that wanted like CCNA notes. This is my process, like when I'm helping students get ready for their CCNAs. I have them drop in. I know I put these in my notes. I don't know if I called it CCNA though. Yeah, I don't see it, but my point is I would go and I would grab these and I would make sure that I could work through these things. Oh, Cisco has a free 20-hour course. Nice. Yeah. Yeah, I tell you guys, man, when I got my CCNA back in 2002, I studied, I was doing it in college. I studied for close to like 2 years to get ready for that, but I was also an infantry guy at the time. And I would just basically, as much as I can get my hands on stuff, I would go do it and get better at it. Katie said, when to use Ansible versus a bash script. The way that I would tell you to do it is bash is wonderful for local stuff. And bash, I used to do bash to hit servers and stuff back in the day. But when I need like a scaffolding around hitting a group of servers reliably and reporting stuff out to me, I always use Ansible for it. Because Ansible will do your error handling and checking and correction and reporting on servers better than bash will, for sure. Bash will just get stuck on things and all this stuff. Ansible can get stuck on things too, but there's a lot of controls in Ansible for that kind of stuff. So yeah, I use Ansible. I mean, I use Ansible against 10,000 servers right now. It's like nothing. And it's a one. I mean, there's weight. Don't get me wrong. There's weight to hitting 10,000 servers. There's literally WAIT and WEIGHT. There's both of those terms, but it's not. There's not that. Lord Processor, you said, how can you get access to the 20-hour course? Somebody put it in the Twitch side of things, but it doesn't come through because Twitch blocks things. I'd be willing to bet it's like, there's probably a thing here. Oh wow, they're letting you access routers and switches virtually, especially if they're letting you do this free. That would be absolutely. They might have some. I don't know how to do that exactly, Lord Processor. I don't know if Jones minds dropping that in the Discord for us, and then I can link it to people. If not, it's probably just one of these Cisco dev ones. You probably just go find it. If it's from Cisco, I'm sure they're telling people about it because they're pretty good. Packet Tracer is free, but then I would say the main one that people are using nowadays to get ready for that stuff is like GNS3. I have a fair amount of stuff that students have done inside of labs, and so I always struggle with this, right? Like, I only have a limited amount of time, right? Everybody's only got a limited amount of time. Everybody on the planet only has a limited amount of time, but I have a limited amount of time, and every time I talk networking in our Discord server, I just get crickets. I'll maybe get one or two people. I don't even think I'd even get two because I'd at least do it for two. But I'll get like one person saying they want to do this or one person doing that. I would love to put GNS servers out there for you people, for you guys to access into and stuff. But I can't justify the time cost for me to do it right now. So, but networking is kind of one of my babies. I enjoy networking. I just won't do it professionally ever again. Like if somebody was like, "Hey Scott, we'd pay you like twice as much to just suck it up and do networking all day." All right, for twice as much, I'd do it. But for anything less than twice as much, I would not do it. And trust me, nobody's going to pay me twice as much as I make now to do networking for them. That's not in the cards. Yeah, it would no. It would take a lot to dislodge me from what I do anyways, because I enjoy what I do, and my projects on like the back end of like the last 3 years, because projects for government a lot of times will be. They'll ramp up, they'll become operational. They're still operational now, but then they'll be on the downside as they're planning the next version. And I'm on the downside of one of those, and I absolutely love it. For so many reasons, I love it. Anyways, all right, we'll stop with that. There's a bunch of Ansible keyword documentation. Man, I think that knowing these keywords, I show you guys this stuff, and man, there's so many things that you can get. Like as you like dig in and more of the time is the great equalizer. You only have so much time to mess around. And man, guys, the things about like what Ansible knows and kind of keeps in its sack. I always joke around about Ansible having this little sack over its shoulder, and it like runs along and does all these things, almost like a little loot gremlin in a game that like takes your loot, but you can whack it. Anyways, with Ansible, you can always reference the variables that are in there if you know how. Actually, speaking of that, I need to fix something before next weekend, so maybe later on tonight I'll be fixing it when we're working in a group. But there's a bunch of role things, and then I really love, there's a bunch of block things. I really love there's task ones. Where's the, oh, these are just the keywords, but special variables are the other ones that I'm a big fan of showing you guys. Because these special variables in Ansible, it's so huge to know these, because I was asked earlier about Bash versus Ansible. When I do Ansible, guys, I always have these two variables right here. Playhosts all are all the people that lined up, all the servers that I have that lined up at the starting line, and these are all the ones that made it to the finish, well, or wherever my playbook finished. So I always have a way to diff between who started and who fell by the wayside. Well, if I'm doing a patching on a night over 5,000 servers, and I have like 10 other like junior engineers like kind of fixing stuff, and I'm kicking servers over to them. Well, let's say my 5,000 servers all finished, but I have 30 servers out of those. So I get 4,970 servers done. And there's 30 servers that are problematic. One, I know it immediately. As the playbook ends, I know. But maybe I even track them as they're falling out, but whatever. But the point is, I know how they failed. If they failed at different points, I can also have checkpoints in my report that come out and do that. I've shown you guys a lot of this stuff in other talks and stuff, but the point is, I know which ones didn't make it, so now I can spin 3 of those off to each of my different engineers. They'll fix the ones they can. Some of the junior ones will kick stuff back up to me, and I'll go work on it. But it's a much better way for me as like a workflow to do that. And some of you guys have seen my reporting on this. In fact, I have a report that comes out every morning in Discord on our sandbox. That's like, this is the Prolog lab check performed today. Any Prolog users may use the system for their lab or testing. Systems will wipe weekly or as needed. Pen testing the lab environment is fine on the weekends. During the week, it's for normal Linux admin, right? And then systems are reachable through here. That's a different way of getting in, but most of you guys know how to get in through the normal way. Total unreachable systems, all our systems are up right here. This Jinja goes and looks for unreachable systems, and then the reboot report in the last 24 hours. This is getting fixed. This is the part that I was showing you guys. That I commented out the part of that's pulling, because these are now being pulled from Loki, and I have all the data. I just need to parse it down correctly for each of the different nodes. If anybody cares, I don't know if anybody cares, but this is what that looks like. Here. No, that was when we were deploying. Where's this at? What's going on? Oh, here. Yeah. This is where I have to fix this last little part. For event and Loki results. So we can pull Loki, right? We know how to pull all the Loki query stuff. We've done that. And we pull all the info from Loki, and we get the Loki result. And then we use that to pimp. There's a lot of stuff, I know, if you guys especially haven't seen this. But we go and we pull all that, and then our Loki in our home lab is, this is our variables for our Loki host. So that's the Loki in my home lab, and this is the query. We look for startup finish. So basically we look for nodes rebooting, all that kind of stuff. Oh, John Jones, you dropped it. Nice, thank you. Let me get, because I want to give that to the person over on Twitch. Here's Netacad. Okay, here's the Netacad stuff for Lord Processor. You asked about the 20-hour basic free stuff. There it is, right there. And then I'll drop it for you guys on Twitch as well. So there you go. Yeah, look at that. That's cool. I really do like. I mean, a lot of these companies, like they're giving it to you because they want you to use it, because they want to keep themselves relevant in the industry. They know engineers that know things will use the things they know, and Look, guys, I think that's very valid reason to do things. Like when I was a kid, Apple used to give schools computers all the time. Why did they do that? Tax write-offs. Everybody knows how to use their Apples, right? Well, they're Mac back then, right? I know it's rebranded Apple, but it was Macintosh back then, right? Um, anyways, yeah, I don't know where I was showing you guys all that stuff, but I feel like I've gotten myself sufficiently thrown off track. But that was the NFS deploy stuff, and that tied back into what we were doing up here, where we were just setting up our where was he at? Our NFS share. And then the next thing we were going to go do was our Apache server. So we were going to build some Apache. And if you guys liked that, if you guys liked the way that I did that with Ansible, we can do the manual build of Apache here, and then we'll go do the automated build with Ansible if you want. So you guys can see that. I think that'll be pretty good. I missed the thing. Okay, let's take a little. I'm gonna take a little break, and I'll put up my little ticker, or I'll turn on my little hourglass for anybody that wants to watch the hourglass. And then for the rest of you guys, I'll say take a break. I'll drop it right here. It'll say break, and although I don't really need to take a walk, I was hiking all morning, but I'm gonna go grab a drink and stuff, and then we'll come back. I mean, I have my waters, but I need to. Maybe I'll just drink water. I'll be back, guys. All right. Ewo on site, how's it going? We are not working super hard right now, but also we're just kind of hanging out and working on. You know, I'm gonna bring up our killer coda again, and I'm going to put on my dark reader. Whoops. Because then I think it will make chat a little more readable for some of you guys, especially when we go into our next little section here. So we're still on break. You guys can still hang out and chat and relax and stuff. We are just doing the what are we doing here? We're on the Apache one next. So I will link the Apache stuff to you guys. You're still on break. Feel free to hang out for a little bit. We're not working super hard on a Saturday morning. Was it Saturday? Yeah, it's Saturday morning. Me and the wife went on a little 2.5 mile hike this morning. Nothing big. And then try to make this kind of useful for you guys here. Again, we'll still wait for people to come back from their break and stuff, and then we'll go into it. Yeah, it wasn't too bad. We're done. We're not working too hard right now. Just staying mobile on the weekends. I'm also I wrestled the last 3 days of this week, so I'm like super sore. But I need to get back to doing that like 4 or 5 times a week like I used to. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with Nginx, Ewo. I do need to make more. I need to make a lab on setting up Nginx for people. Although I'm gonna be making more Killer Coda labs soon, and that's gonna be in support of our automation course. So real quick, while we're still technically on break here, let me show you guys some stuff about our little Prolug. Prolug is free. It's our Linux users group. Put this over here in the corner so we know when break's over. Actually, I'll wait until break's over to explain it, because maybe people are still walking around, and then we'll do that, and then we'll go on with the rest of it. But yeah, what am I thinking here? Yeah, it's definitely something that Nginx or HPD, you know, you don't have to have a preference of them, but I would say that I've definitely set up more HTTPD in my career professionally, like Apache. HPD is just the fork for the Red Hat side of things, but I think you could put directly Apache on there. It's just HUD is a package in their repos that was forked from Apache, so HTTPD. Yeah, anyways. All right. I would say I don't really have a favorite. When I do Kubernetes, I almost exclusively use Nginx because it's just such a good proxy. So I would say, like, I see Nginx being used very often in the industry when people want like quick stuff, like quick connectivity and reverse proxies and that kind of stuff. And then I see HTTPD when you want to use like the big flagship and have like Tomcat and like these other, like, you want it to be like your main web service. That was interesting. Weird noises downstairs. I don't think the wife is here either, so it's weird if I'm hearing noises downstairs. Ranger's not here anymore, unfortunately, so if you guys remember Ranger Dog. All right. Bash study group. That starts in 3 minutes, guys, so if you guys want to go do Bash and that kind of stuff. Nginx is now in Kate's using Envoy and bundled in another CNCF product. Nice. Yeah. Oh, man. Me and the wife were walking this morning down like the aisles. We were at Winco, which is kind of like a big food place out here. I don't know if they're everywhere, but on the Southwest. And people like them because they're kind of like how Costco is. The people own, like the employees own the Winco. But anyways, she was like, we could walk down this aisle, and it was like all the dog food aisle. And she's like, then we'll just be sad about Ranger. And I was like, oh no. I was like, no, we're not going down. We're not going down that freaking aisle. But anyways, so there was always this thing with me and the wife where I would try to buy Ranger more beds, but she would only let me have 2 beds for Ranger. And me and my son, we wanted to build Ranger a bed all the way up to the ceiling, and then like a set of beds to get up there. And that would, guys, it would have been like Minecraft. Like, think of how many blocks you would need to build at this, and then squishy to get a stable bed all the way up to the ceiling. We're talking hundreds of beds. But then she started limiting us. Every time we would buy a new bed, she'd get rid of one of the old ones. So then we had to kind of back off of that. So, like right now, someone else. Yeah, I do want you guys to go in the Bash study group, and I tell people, even if you make it to the study group and you're not, there's nobody else there, it's still there for you to study and work with people and post stuff that's, almost sounds like somebody's outside with like big equipment. Isn't it Saturday morning? I don't know. Anyways, all right. Looking right now, someone else wants to start the Bash study group. Go, you can't make it. Oh, that's okay, cool. Because, yeah, these things happen. I can't always make it to the night one either. So what I wanted to show you guys, though, was this. And I was mentioning this earlier. We do have, for people that want to hang out today, there is there's going to be admin security project presentations. Some people told me they wanted to present again. Either present again or they didn't get to present in the second run of the admin course. So I set this up. You know, it's going to be as many people as want to do it. It's just for chance people to put together security or admin engineering projects to present their projects again, or people that missed it and wanted to talk and show people. Because I think a lot of people got like a good amount of extra stuff done from, from the systems admin or security engineering space. So I think people wanted to get out there and show what they had done. Then the other thing, that's coming up is we're going to do a round 2 of the security engineering course. So we'll do that again, starting, next weekend, man. I was looking at it and I'm like, oh man, it's already next weekend. So there's that. And then we're going to start the security automation course. So if you guys haven't done automation before professionally, like maybe, look, we've all done like little bash scripts and we've all built little things and done cool little stuff. But I'm going to be trying to emphasize this on how this fits into the industry, where I've used it. I'm going to bring some professionals in that have done some of this stuff as well, and have them talk to you guys and that kind of stuff. What's the up? Yeah. So and then did I miss anything else? Yeah. Okay, that's good. All right, so let's get back to this. We're in the Apache server. It's linked up in chat a little bit. If anybody needs the lab, let me know. But it says your team has determined that they need a website to test deployments rapidly. These things happen. This is a smart way to have things. You've been tasked with installing a web server on node 01. So let's make sure node 01 exists. Good, he's there. We're going to deploy an Apache web server on node 01. We're going to capture the version and install the Apache 2 packages. We need to do this because security team's going to be asking us, you installed something new, you opened ports, you did things that were outside of whatever was our agreed upon configuration of servers. I try to tell you guys, these things aren't combative. It's not like, hey, I'm going to get in a fist fight with security teams. Sometimes you want to fist fight security teams. Trust me. You'll never find somebody, well, you may find somebody who dislikes security teams more than me, but you will probably not find people that have gotten into it with security teams as often as I have over the years. And so much so, do you guys all know why I have my CISSP? Some of you guys know, some of you don't know. I got my CISSP. I went and studied, had my company send me to a training for a week, and then I paid $795 of my own money to take that test and pass it, so that, and only when I send stuff to security, I have a separate email called security signature where it says CISSP after my name. You guys know that? Like, that's the only reason I got my CISSP. Not because I wanted to move into that space, not because I wanted to be considered good in that space. I literally got it so that when I would argue with those fucking people and they'd be like pulling it out all the time, like, oh, well, I know this about security. I'm like, I'd fucking have your industry standard cert, so I know it too. And this is the way it works operationally in a Linux server, and we can't do that. Guys, I used to get into it all the time with them with kernels, like old kernels on a box. Anyways, it's neither here nor there. Like, if a kernel's not active, it doesn't have any vulnerabilities exposed, right? But if we need to go back to an old kernel because something's wrong in an environment, we need an old kernel in the trunk. And they just didn't. We would literally fight this every time kernel patching happened. And this went all the way up to like C-suites in my company. So like C-level people would be sitting there going, watch this, what are these fucking people arguing about? And I'm like, the system has to go on. Like, we can't have security just stop the system. If you have the best brakes ever, like let's say you own a trucking company and you buy the best brakes ever, and the brakes are so good that your trucks cannot even leave the parking lot. How fucking long can you live like that? How long can you keep feeding people in trucking when the brakes are so good the trucks never even leave the lot anymore? And this was the argument I used to get into with these guys, right? Anyways, neither here nor there. But yeah, I'll tell you, you won't find many people that have had like knockdown, like drag out fights with people where like I'm ready to quit. It's fucking, and then the only thing that keeps me from quitting is my rage against the other people that I'm gonna make them quit. Anyways, but verify that node 01 is listening on port 80, and then verify that the web pages were. Yeah, it used to get really bad, guys. Like my boss would be like, Scott, you need to calm down. And I'm like, I'm not calming down. Right? I'm like Chris Tucker and anybody here ever seen Rush Hour 2? They're trying to calm him down when they give him the $50 chips at the table instead of the $100 chips, and he's like, "What? You don't think I can afford $100 chips?" And then he fucking starts like yell. Anyways, all right. So we go to node 01. We see there's no package. All right, I'll calm down. There's no package, and there's nothing on the system for Apache 2. Well, we kind of see that because there's no package, but we're testing. And we're going to install Apache 2 on this box, right? Then we're going to see what's there for Apache 2, which, again, sometimes more things are packaged up than others. But no, I really did. That is like one of the most fickle things I've ever done in my career was I did get my CISSP just to spite those guys. And then I got a whole bunch of other security certs, but I did those more for fun. And then now, look, we got Apache 2. We also got this Apache bin and Apache data and Apache utils. So we got other stuff there. That's not that. Yeah, so HTTPD is a fork for RHEL repos, but it is still Apache under the hood. So if you ever install HTTPD, the user is even still Apache, right? But Apache 2 is different in that HTTPD was forked from it, yeah, for RHEL. And I don't know why they did that. I mean, you can probably go look up the background on it, but they are the same. It is all Apache server. All right, so then we go and we start it. We've got it started. We see it running on port 80. We see it listening on port 80. It's doing all the things. So this is LSOF, and then this is SS to see the actual port being opened and the processes that are attached to it. So our system is listening as long as there's no firewall in the way, which there's no firewall. Then we should be able to curl node 01. So we can exit back to control plane and curl node 01, and there's our web page. A little hard to read in a command line, but it is the web page. We are hitting port 80. We are getting something back. You could also probably get away with something like this. I don't have you do this, but NC node 01 on port 80. And you could probably, if there were any headers or anything, read that. We don't have anything there, but we should be able to. I use -VZ just to make sure that it connected. Yeah, there we go. So we connected on port 80. And if you ever use Netcat, the fun thing about Netcat is it's the underpinning of what most people know how to use, which is Nmap. Nmap just uses a bunch of NC calls under the hood. If you ever go strace it, that's all it's doing. Yeah, Docker alternative like Podman. Well, Docker got forked. Docker got supplanted a few times because of breaking changes against Kubernetes, which I think, like, because I was kind of watching a lot of that stuff happen, and I'm like, why is their release breaking everything again for everybody? Like, why did they choose to do, like, they made choices that like broke stuff for people, and like nobody could understand why, and then people started moving away from it. And Docker is still the name that's associated with it, but they are not, like, even Kubernetes under the hood uses containerd as their recommended. I mean, you can use a bunch of different container management or whatever, but yeah, we don't typically run Docker underneath that stuff anymore because it's too breaking. They did build it. They did officially set the standard. They're like how Advil is. If you guys have ever heard those stories. It was aspirin? Advil. I think it was aspirin. What's the one where they lost the brand because they were so good, but then they lost the brand because Kleenex is another one of them. They're so good that they just like are the standard, but then it becomes like your trademark is too good, so now we have to generic term, and then you have to call yourself something else. And that's actually happened a few times. You can look that up if you want. It doesn't matter. That's like more like history type stuff. So you set up a web server. Your team has the requirement for 3 different environments. So in this web server, we're going to have 3 different places where we can go put stuff and test stuff and do stuff without affecting the uptime of the server. I would think Google's probably close to one if it's not one. Like go Google that, right? But then we're going to set up a directive for each web page that identifies the following web pages. So we're going to set up port 8080, 8081, and 8082. And then we're going to have an HTML page for each of those that names the page. because then we could just drop stuff in each of those different environments and test our web pages or whatever. Again, I mostly just keep the servers up and running, guys. I let my teams, my dev teams and stuff do the other stuff. But for me, I just need to keep the servers up and running, right? So I'm going to give them these environments. So this is how you might do it by hand. It's not the only way, but this is maybe the way. You'd go to node 01 and you would make the directories. I'm going to make all the directories in one fell swoop, one command. And what this just did was all we had was var www.html. You're going to have to take my word for it now. But now if we cd to var www, in there now we have these other three, which, well, you don't really have to take my word. Here it was. And here's the three new ones, dev, test, and QA. And this is what we call the wildcard expansion, in case some of you guys have never heard it before. You've probably seen it done before, but maybe you didn't know what it was called to go look it up. It's called a wildcard expansion. And HTML_dev was made. HTML_test was made. And HTML_QA was made. Right there. Boom. So we did it all in one command. I find this weird thing with engineers and admins where, and it's almost like we're all sitting around and like we're trying to tell stories. You guys ever heard the story, the old saying, the first liar never stood a chance? I come up and I tell a story about how great my childhood was. It wasn't, but let's say it was. And then Sending Grounds goes next, and he's had a better childhood than me. And I'm like, well, of course, because he was floating on clouds and he was, whatever. But the point is, like, the first liar never stood a chance because the second liar can always tell a bigger story. Does that make sense? And my point is, devs, I feel like there's this weird thing with not even devs, but admins and engineers where it's like they all get together and when especially when they're showing people stuff, they try to do it the shortest way possible. They're like, if I can do it in 4 keystrokes, it's worth 10 extra hours of work than if I had done that thing in 5 keystrokes. And I'm like, that's probably true at some like scale and when you're really cleaning stuff up to get it down that much. But like for me in my daily work, like the slop that comes out of the side of like my daily work doesn't matter that much to me. But you'll find people that do care about that stuff, and it'll come down to that over time and stuff. But anyways, this is a short way to do something I could have just done by pressing up and changing it a few times. But I did that just to show you guys that there are all these cool things. But if you never pick it up and you never adopt that, I don't care. And if you gave me a procedure that said do it this one and then do this one and then do this one, I'd be okay with that too. There's literally nothing wrong with it. Some people want to compress things down in such a way. You'll hear my buddy Salty Catfish talk about this sometimes. He streams sometimes. He's one of our programmers. He's been a programming lead for a long time. He'll talk about people compressing stuff down so much that their code is no longer maintainable by them, which is a problem, but also by the rest of the team, which is even worse of a problem, right? Because they're not always going to be there. So anyway, so then let's go look. So I didn't show this, but I do. I can get in there. I didn't show this, but in Etsy Apache, now there's a bunch of files that were added with our package. And we saw in one of our earlier labs that we could do dpackage-l for Apache 2, which was the package we added, and we'd see all these cool things, including all of its configuration locations right here, where all of these files were added out of that package. But that's not really what we care about right now. I just want to show you that in here, we can add a bunch of things that configure how Apache works. They're called directives. We call them directives. And let's go look at some of the directives that we have. So Etsy ports is one that I'm going to look at here. Ports.conf. I'm dumb. And all we're listening to right now is port 80. Well, that's interesting. And then I've got some directives that if we're listening on 443, it'll be the SSL module. So, okay, we've got some other conditional things. This is a full directive right here. It's turned on and it's turned off. But I'm just going to go right here and add a new line. And then I'm going to go right here and grab these, Control-C, Control-Shift-V, and it'll drop in these. Now, by the way, those Control-Shift things I just said, none of those are real in probably any actual terminal you're using. We're using like a web browser for a terminal. So this is another one of those things where I tell you, knowing shortcuts is very much less to me than understanding where you would put it. Like you could have typed these out in the time I've been talking about it, right? We're going to escape :WQ, and we're going to save that file. Now, it might not surprise anybody to know that just because I did that did not turn on those ports listening on my server. My server's not listening on those ports for one of the reasons we defined earlier, which was Linux servers and services do not go back and pick up config files when they're on the run. You have to tell them to stop and restart. And there's a very valid reason for that. I don't have the rest of the stuff I need set up yet. Those would just be listening and wouldn't have a place to serve from yet. So let's go set up the serving of those web pages. So I'm going to go and I'm going to go look at this directory real quick. CD to etc Apache 2. And in here, under sites enabled, here's the default site right here. And we're going to go look at the config file for the default site. And this is going to be a big old hot mess. Actually, I need to make this a little smaller because this will be too big to fit on the screen. I'm going to make it a little smaller. And look at this. It's got one directive in it. The directive says virtual host is anything that comes in on our listener for port 80. So we're listening on port 80 right now. We just set up 8080, 8081, and 8082, but they don't have a directive yet here. So we're going to set up those directives in a second. And then there's all these commented out things that I don't care about. But there's a server admin, that's optional, and a document root that is not optional. You must have a document root. And then there's an error log and a custom log, which are also optional, but we're going to add them. But everything else here is commented out. So of this file, there are the directive being started and the directive being closed. They are tagged on and tagged off, right? Like any markup language might be, but this just happens to be a config file. And then there's 4 things we can add, but only one of them is actually needed. The other 3 are optional. So there's 4 total things. 3 of them are optional. Only one of them, I could have done this, right? No, I'm not going to flip everybody off. So let's go make that file real quick. So by the way, any file in here, sites enabled, is going to be read. So I'm just going to go ahead and take the one that we were given here, which is teamtesting.conf. And now I could type these all out, but I'm lazier than the average person. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm just going to copy my pre-created directives. I wrote these a long time ago. I don't even remember them. But look real quick. Could we, for a second, just look at these and rationalize what's happening? Well, this is the start of a virtual host, and this is the stop of it. Here's the start of, and by the way, listening on 8080, 8081, and 8082. Those are the 3 I said earlier. Okay. And the document root, which is the root of the what the Apache server is serving out on that port. We had to define this early on in web servers because people used to be able to get up and read stuff from like the server root. So this is almost like a CH root in that var www.html dev is going to be the furthest up that somebody coming in on port 8080 can see on our server. Same thing for 8081 will be the test, and then 8082 will be the QA. So that's our dev, test, and QA as defined right here. Dev, test, and QA. All we did was map down things that we already had, and all we actually did, if you really wanted to know, is I pulled this from that other file, took out all the comments, and then copied it 3 times and modified it for what we needed. Super easy set of steps. I'm not, like, this isn't rocket science or nothing here, right? Then we come down here, we're going to hit escape :WQ. And the last thing we need to do then is if we have all of those files set, we need to go into each of our different document roots that we created at the very beginning, and we're just going to add values. So I'm going to hit I in here real quick, and for this page, I'm going to give dev page. So this is going to be called the dev page if I'm in HTML dev. And then I'm going to go to test, and test is going to get the test block of HTML. By the way, HTML is also one of these ones that I think most of you can look at for about a minute and go, I get it, right? And then we're going to do the last one, which was QA. So we'll look at QA. Here's the simplest little HTML page in all the world. It's the simplest HTML that works, right? And then we've got to restart Apache. Why do we restart Apache? Because if we don't, we're not actually listening on those other ports yet. So we restart Apache. Now we're listening on all those ports. Look, port 8080, port 8081, port 8082. So now we're listening. And then we could just do a simple little curl command. And we could do it from this machine or the other one. And we're going to look on port 8080, and we're going to see the dev page. We're going to look on 8081, and we're going to see the test page. And we're going to look on 8082, and we're going to see the QA page. That's all we did. Now, look at you learning Linux. That's all we had to do. So we built an Apache server and client setup to verify its functionality. There's no client for Apache. Your server can just curl over to it or use wget or whatever. Given a bash prompt and 2 servers, complete in the allotted time. We did that. Complete all activities in the lab, have multiple Apache ports listening and providing different document root locations. We did that. So, and importantly is we understood how we mapped the things to each other. It's all chutes and ladders, right? Chutes and ladders. I was watching an old, so I was telling the wife this morning when we were on our hike. I got tagged. Something happened. Something in some algorithm with Amazon got tagged where when I like to watch Prime, I think I gave some older British show a chance. By the way, I love British humor. I think British humor is so funny. And something tagged me as, well, I always watch a lot of horror. And I think I've watched all the horror that's on Amazon Prime, even the bad stuff. Like I was going down into like the 3-star stuff and just like, oh, this is terrible, but I'm going to watch it. And I got tagged for like this show from like the 1980s in England. It was like a British show. And it's surprisingly good fucking horror. Like, I'm like, this is a fun horror show. People that are like doing this from when I was barely born in like 81, right? And these guys are like, you know, like there's a guy in one of them, and I was like, how do I know that guy? And then I stopped and I called the wife and I was like, remember Stryker? Do you guys remember Stryker, the guy who made Wolverine? That old dude? He's like 30 in this. Well, anyways, I was watching one. Hold on, I'll tell you here, Robodom, what it's called. I'll tell you what it's called here in a second. But then I was watching another one just yesterday called in the Layer of the White Worm, which is a Bram Stoker book. And I'm like, I didn't even know this book existed. 1 and 2, this show is from 1980, and Hugh Grant is in it. And I don't know if you guys know how old Hugh Grant is. He's about as old as my mom. Hugh Grant was like 20 in this movie. So I like saw this guy. I saw this fucking kid, and I was like, is that Hugh Grant? And he's like the Lord of the Manor. And I was like, that's fine. I don't even necessarily like or dislike Hugh Grant. I mean, I don't go out of my way to watch his romantic comedies or anything. But he's like chopping this snake up in this thing. It's pretty, but it's like a British humor. It was actually tagged as a humor show. And I'm like, this is a horror movie, and it's also kind of sacrilegious. But I mean, whatever. I mean, it is what it is for a horror movie. You get what you get. But it was like this snake lady. It was actually kind of interesting. I wouldn't say it was great by any stretch of the means. Hold on, Robin, I'll tell you what the name of that show was that had that other guy. The surprisingly decent horror was this. Hold on, I gotta go find it real quick. But I've had a few of these shows. This one was called... That was 95. That was that. Oh! This is from 1980. It's called Hammer House of Horrors. So, it's funny. I'd pull it up, but I really don't think, I don't think Amazon will show up. Like, if I showed it right here, I think there's stuff blocked. No, it doesn't. Okay. This is it right here. Surprisingly fun little show. And I'm only on episode 3, but it's just an anthology of horror. And if you guys like anthology type stuff, what an anthology means is this story isn't connected to that one, right? Like, this is a story about some family, this is a story about a completely different family with completely different actors and different. That's what anthologies are. Hammer House of Horrors, yeah, Robodom, that's what it is. I actually thought it was funny, but the funniest thing about it to me was, like, I'm watching the dude that played Stryker and like fought Wolverine. He didn't fight Wolverine, but he like made Wolverine and was having a contest of wills with him. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. So we just configured Apache by hand. What's owner? So if we looked at the PID, right? So if we said we know PSEF grep for, let's do it this way. Let's go system CTL status HTTP Apache 2 in this one. So use HTTPD Apache 2. How is it running? Well, here's the PID 479, and here's the user, Apache 2. So then I do a psef grep for Apache 2 on my server, and here's all the Apache 2 stuff running, but the owner, right, the user ID that started it is actually www data. So if I do an ID on www data, there's the user ID for that. And is there an Apache 2 user? There's no Apache 2 user, so they use www-data, right? And that's the one that's actually running that PID. That's the name of the user. So that's the one that's actually, if we were to grep, that's the user that was actually added on this system. Yeah, Robedom, it's surprisingly fun. I was watching, I was telling the wife about it, and I was like, and also, and I was telling the wife, I said, and also there's just a lot of nudity in it. And she goes, oh yeah, the British don't care about that stuff nearly as much as we do. And I said, apparently not, because they like being scared as much as they like being naked in this stuff. And it's just kind of funny. But it's been surprisingly fun as far as that goes. But the other one was called The Layer of the White Worm. That's the one that had a real young Hugh Grant, which again, I don't like or dislike Hugh Grant. He's just some dude that, you know, my mom likes from romantic comedies or whatever. Yeah, British entertainment's actually pretty good. There's a really good one that my wife and I watched a play earlier this year called The Scarlet Pimpernel. And I always tell her like the Scarlet Pumper Doodle, and I always like make up these names, but it's the Pimpernel. And it's this story from the early 1900s about the French Revolution. And if you ever read this guy, he's basically he came out like 10 years before any Batman stuff was ever written. And if you like read about the Scarlet Pimpernel, there's I think there's 19 stories on him. He is basically Batman before Batman. He's a rich Englishman who him and his friends go and cause all this problems during the French Revolution to stop them from just chopping people's fucking heads off. And like they're always like tricking people and all this stuff, and it's kind of like a comedy humor thing, but it's also like really dark because like if they don't save these people, they're gonna get their heads chopped off, or as they say, feed ma guillotine, right? Or guillotine, but guillotine is fine too. Kiwi here I am for a while and want to say hi. Like your stories besides the high quality team. Yeah, Kiwi Bites, you've been around for a while. But yeah, we're just hanging out. I'm never working too hard. Let's contrast what I just did there. And if you did the lab with me, let's contrast this real quick with how we would do that with Ansible. Because I did three things over, I did three tasks over and over again, right? And doesn't it kind of make sense that if I have a tool that I say can automate things, I should be able to do these things in an automated fashion, like have a machine build it for me, like a machine press or something, so I don't just have to like build all of these by hand. Because actually, let's go look at the lab, because it'll help a lot if you guys see the lab to what I say in the lab to kind of tie into what I'm about to say here. In the lab. You are web server environment. Yeah, you are a victim of your own success in this lab. So let's go hop down to that part of the lab book. And again, the lab book is really just there to give you guys more information around. Was it 16? Web server deploy. Yeah. Let's make this a little bigger. The book is there to give you more color commentary and stuff to practice. But here's the thing. You are a victim of your own success. Your team was so happy with your work on deploying a web server, you did it by hand, that 10 other teams have come to ask you to do that same deployment for them. Maybe you're an admin for a company who, this is a very common thing. Not very common, but I'd say this would be something that an admin might run into. Your company maybe hires out web server deployment teams to go work on people's servers. And then now these teams are like, well, that's really cool that this one team that, works internally got this set of web servers set out so that they can just test and do stuff in different environments and build all these things. And we want that for our teams as well. I could see that. I see so often you do something as an admin or engineer and other teams see it and go, ooh. Or somebody's showing it off in a meeting and some other manager's like, oh, what was that right there? Can you show me that? And then now you've got more tasks. And we joke around about how like no good deed goes unpunished, but as admins and engineers, if you do one thing well, you become that guy. In fact, in the engineering course, you do something well with like the firewall stuff, and then immediately the next question is, well, now that you're the firewall guy, what about this? And it's unrelated, and you're like, oh god, but you're now pegged as the firewall guy, even though that's not what you do, right? So anyways, yeah, Robodom, you become the go-to. But I jokingly tell you guys all the time that like a Linux guy gets tagged as the go-to guy for everything. Troubleshooting, right? We're always troubleshooting. So make web server available on node 01, and then we're going to set up all these things. And then we're going to make sure that there's an HTML existing page for each of the things, and we're going to make sure it all works. So we're going to check our root host file, and we're going to see here's all our servers, but in this case we're just setting up this one web server, and we can fix that file so it looks a little nicer when it cats out, but it's because it doesn't have a new line at the end of it. But web servers are node 01, the environment is dev, and the app is web. Okay. And then we're going to go look real quick at some stuff that's down in the answers file, in the answers directory. I have a whole bunch of things that I've already created for you guys to go look at if you want to. And then we're going to go look at one of our index files. Here's one of our little index files. And then we're going to go look at one of our, this is the dev virtual host configuration. And it's one of those little directives, but instead of all three of them being in one file, we're going to have three of them in three different files. And it's dev virtual host. He's listening on port 8080. And he's got all of those basic things that we expect. var www html dev, which is going to have to be created, all this kind of stuff. And then what I'm going to do, instead of creating this file by hand, I'm going to copy in the answers. What is he? Web environment.yaml over to root. And I'm going to cd to root, and then I'm going to just look at this file. Let's view it. That's fine. We start out with 3 dashes, which let us know that it's a YAML file, right? That's how we start out. And it's web server, web environment. This is an arbitrary name. We can put almost whatever we want to the right of this. There's special characters that'll break stuff, but as long as you don't put those in there, you're fine. And host web servers. So web servers tie back to the node 01 from our host file, right? So anything that needed to become a web server would have to be included in the inventory web servers, or we could add more, like if we had, right, if we had web deb servers and a web prod servers, if we had a bunch of different types of servers that needed to be dropped in here, we could do that, right? We don't necessarily need that here, so we're going to just get rid of that. We're not even going to save that. We're in view, so we shouldn't be saving things here anyways. View is a read-only mode unless you do an exclamation mark. Vars, we don't have any special vars that we're giving it. We're not going to, we are going to gather facts just so that we have those for variables. And then we're going to become true. So become is going to be our method for becoming root. And you can also have become underscore method. So we can have sudo as the default. So we're using sudo to become root. We're already root in the environment, so this doesn't really matter here. Now, if I was a normal user and that user was going to jump to my nodes and then sudo up with like a sudo password, then we would use become true here, and that would be a correct way to do it. You might say, why would you do that? Because on prod servers, let's say you deploy a set of prod servers and then you're going to run this for just production, right? And we would never have root able to be logged into on a production server. I'm not saying you don't ever do that. I'm saying I never do that. That's just a bad practice for me, anything customer facing. So then I would have to come in as like a service Ansible account or my user and run this and then become root on the box. And then here's our tasks. Tasks are a list in YAML of multiple tasks. So here's the first one, name is Apache 2. Put the Apache server on the machine. Then down here, we're going to create the directories for var www.html underscore. And then we're going to use the counting variable of item. State is going to be a directory, so we're going to make directories according to this loop, dev, test, and QA. And now I've updated this lab in the last few months because this used to be the old way of doing Ansible, which was with underscore items. So when we used to do with underscore items, that was our way of looping over a set of items, which was this list. And then that makes sense why the counting variable is item, right? Item is going to get dropped in each time as we find dev. It'll be var www.html dev test QA. But if you ever wonder why loop creates item and you're like, where the hell is item dot this and whatever, it's because it used to be with underscore items. So there's like a little bit of a throwback. And you will also find working with underscore items code because it's still backwards compatible with old code. So you will find that in my stuff all the time. If you go look through my, even these labs and stuff, you'll find with underscore items. I try to get rid of most of them, but I'm sure you'll still find them. So, all right. There's a notify here if you had to do any of those. So if this comes back as changed, we're going to restart Apache. Notifies always happen at the end via handlers. So we're notifying the handler restart Apache if we made any changes here. Then we come to our next task. We're going to add the listener ports for Apache 2 ports.conf. And the items here are going to be looped over as listen 8080, listen 8081, and listen 8082. They're going to be inserted after the first time it finds the line listen, which if you guys remember looking at that file earlier, it was listen space 80, right? So this is going to populate 8080, then it's going to populate 8081 underneath it, and then it's going to populate 8082 underneath that. It's going to do that each time it loops through, okay? Then, if it had to make a change, it's going to notify restart Apache. However, like I often tell you guys with a bunch of kids turning on a light switch in a room, if all the kids just smack up the light switch as they come in the room, does the light turn any more on? No, it's just on. Well, a handler is the same way. When we notify a handler, all these notifications are like turning on a light switch. You don't turn it on anymore. At the end, the handler is going to look and see that it's been alerted, and it's going to trigger one time. Does not matter that it, at the end of this it would have triggered, at the end of this it would have triggered. Now we're going to go put those virtual directive files in there. So virtual dev host.conf is going to go in, QA and test, and these are going to be dropped in that sites enable directory where I said you can have as many files as you wanted with the .conf on there, and it will read all the virtual directives. So now instead of having one big file like we did earlier, we have 3 different files which are for dev, test, or dev, QA, or test. And then we're going to go and say restart Apache. So that's the 3rd time we're restarting Apache if there's modifications here. But again, it's only going to trigger once. Then at the very beginning we made the directories. Now we're going to the root directories. Now we're going to push the HTML page over, and this gets slightly more complex, but not really. Right here we're going to have a source and destination. And in our loop, instead of just being item now, because this would have normally been item, we're going to split it out. There's going to be either an item.env or an item.name. So our variables are, but for each loop, they're going to be the same. So on this first iteration, the name, right here, source is going to be answers dev underscore index.html. And the environment that it's going to go to, so item.environment, excuse me, is going to be var www.html dev and then index.html. So I'm changing the name. I'm being sneaky, and I'm changing the name of each of those directories, or each of those not directories, those are just flat web pages. I'm changing each of those to index.html, and I'm just using it with 2 variables right there. Super simple. Even though that has to happen 3 times, it's going to notify the handler to restart Apache for the 4th time now. So it's been 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's still only going to happen once. And then the handler to restart Apache is this: restart Apache, systemd, restart Apache. The state is restarted though, so we'll restart Apache. It kills Apache, restarts it, and then now we will have deployed all of our things. So let's go down, and there's all those things. That's how we all did it. We copied it if we needed to. And then let's run that playbook and see if it does the things that we expect it to do. Let's go install our Apache server. Will it do it? Should. Take a little bit of time. We could also watch this very verbose, but we don't need to see it doing all of its setup and stuff and taking all of its time. Oh, I have it here on my glasses. All right, there we go. We see it creating the directories. We see it adding those listening ports. See how there's all those changed? At the end of each of those, it was setting the notify for the alert handler for the restart Apache. Get all the way down to the bottom, and it restarted Apache. Just for fun. What happens if we rerun this? Nothing has to change, right? Everything's going to be found correct. We will not see that handler at the bottom of this because it doesn't need to run. You don't even see it anymore. Look, all these are green. There's no changed. So the handler would have called right here. Push HTML over for each page and then the recap, right? Push the HTML over, run the handler because he was alerted this time. But down here, and for all future runs of this against this server, nothing has to change. So nothing gets restarted. I go delete one of those. Watch. I cd to etc. It's over on node 01, so sh node 01. I cd to etc Apache 2. Sites.enabled. rm-rf test. Exit. I rerun my playbook. Now, only one thing has changed. Watch, only one thing's going to show up. And it's going to have to restart Apache to get it back working right. See it? That's one of the power. Like when people ask me like why is Ansible so popular and why would you do this with Ansible instead of just going by doing it by hand with Bash, or couldn't you have done all these same things and had them locally and then pushed them with a Bash? Oh, I could absolutely do that with a Bash script. That's like the first 10 years of my career before I found Ansible. Like in the early 2000s, Ansible wasn't around until 2013. Yeah, I used to do all that stuff with Bash scripts, and that's fine. That's still valid. You'll still find Bash scripts doing stuff like this, but nowadays, I mean, there's so much power here to do it this way. So, so much scaffolding around it to do it. By the way, if I run it again, you won't see it. You won't see the handler again. You won't see it restart because it doesn't need to anymore. All right. So we did that, and then it says, you've been extremely successful. All the teams now want the ability to redeploy only parts of the applications or remove stuff. And you're like, oh, victim of my own success again. They each want pieces to exist independently of each other. So break out the playbook and turn off the listener for test on port 8081. And when I first wrote this, I said there's no answers here. You just have to do this one on your own. But then I wrote it. So there is a copy for the individual stuff. And I'm going to walk you through this one, but let's just say this one is, now there's requirements. These are comments that I just put at the top. Required variables. You need deploy, environment, and port. If you don't add those, this is going to break all over the place. Still the same setup if you're setting things up, but now we get to a block. And this block of code is only going to execute when deploy is equal to present. So your options are deploy as present or deploy as absent. So are you adding something or are you deleting something from a previous deployment? And say when deploy is equal to present, then all of these indented tasks are going to happen. That's our original deploy. And then now back to the original indent level. If deploy is absent, we're going to delete these things. So now we're going to remove certain things, we're going to remove the listeners, and we're going to remove the virtual directives based on what you give. And then there's going to be a handler at the end who doesn't care about any of that stuff before and restarts Apache only if you tell him to. All right, so the way we run this one looks like this. We can go look at it, and then when we run it, we're actually going to run it by giving an absent, environment test, and port 8081. We're going to remove those values. Now you might say, if I gave a different environment, like if I did dev but I did that same number for test, you'd break this thing all over the place, and that would be on you because you didn't even know how your own thing worked. Automation can't always handle all those things, and we could have spent a whole bunch of hours and a whole bunch of extra time making sure that we handled all of those edge cases. But we're not worried about edge cases here. We're assuming that people are going to give you what you want here, but very quickly you'll find that users will give you wrong information, and then now this solution doesn't really work anymore. We have to make it more robust, and we have to give it more. And you'll find that there's like this iterative give and take where when you first write a tool, this is actually something Sending talks about in one of his talks that he's come and given to our group for a little bit. When you write your tool to start, you know how the tool's laid out. It's almost like you put a bunch of tent stakes in the ground and are putting your tent up, and then you know where all that stuff is. But then, my family's got a lot of young kids running around, like my extended brothers and stuff, and on the wife's side too, all the extended cousins and nieces and nephews over there. And like the kids will trip over, we'll put up our tent, and then the kids will trip over our stuff all the time. I actually need to just like hang chem lights on because like we'll set up our tent stakes, and kids will run around the outside of the tent, clothesline themselves on your tent stake or whatever. And it's the same kind of thing here, where like when you first write something, you know how it works really well, but nobody else does. But as you go to kind of like productionalize it more and more, and now your team's using it, you're going to start getting all these like weird cases from people. And now I got to make it a little more robust, and I got to do a little more error correction in there. And when you're ready to finally release it to like the full company or like a bigger group of people, there's more and more like kind of rigor and things that have to be taken into account around, honestly, sanitization of inputs, right? Like I can't trust that you're going to give me the right stuff. You give kids some toy that's designed to be worked a certain way, and they're immediately going to pour dirt in it and spill M&Ms in it and do whatever, and next thing you know, the toy doesn't work the way it's supposed to. And that's kind of the true of all these types of machines, right? But anyways, we deleted all that, and then if I were to run that again, it wouldn't have to run again because it would see that everything was gone already. I wouldn't have to delete it. But then if I needed to fix everything, like let's say there was just something wrong, I could rerun my original deployment. My original deployment would set it all back, but it would only have to fix the ones that were busted. And then it would restart Apache, because it has to, and then it would go from there. And I actually got into that a little bit. You guys did this lab, if you did the security engineering course, where we were talking about configuration drift. And some team figured out that they could keep deploying or destroying certain parts of your environment. But God, this happens sometimes. Somebody finds out that they can destroy things in an environment, so they do, so that it works for them. But then their manager comes to you and says, hey, or even goes to your manager and says, hey, why is this environment broken for my other 19 guys? And you're like, because the one guy figured out or had this document or something, had some powers he shouldn't have. This also comes into like, the more you give pseudo powers up front, the harder it is to take them back. Which is one of the reasons why admins are such assholes about giving you guys power. If you don't have like root in an organization, you're like, that guy never gives me any permissions or anything. It's so hard to fucking claw permissions back from people. It might as well be trying to like pick mud up off of like a tile floor. Oh yeah, I can get a lot of it with my hands, but I can't make that floor look clean anymore. There's still going to be mud everywhere, right? Like I just can't. You can't clean it up. You can't get rid of it. Not with your hands, right? And it's the same kind of idea, I think, in my mind. But anyways, so here's a bunch of questions about this. What packages needed to run a web server in the lab? Well, that was Apache 2. This is the first lab that talks about handlers. What is the behavior condition for notifying a handler for a task? Well, we have to have changed in one of the earlier tasks, and those tasks have to notify the handler. It's called notify to alert the handler that it's time to run. That notify is triggered when there's a change in the task that's happened. So all of these changes triggered. This one did not. We didn't delete that. We didn't have to change the virtual directives file. Apparently that didn't get removed. That's interesting. I didn't remove that apparently. Because I guess when you remove the listener, this doesn't really matter if the listener's not listening. But in the individual web environment YAML file, we use a task called block. What is the function of block in Ansible? A block of code to only execute, a set of tasks to only execute when a condition exists. We can define that condition any way we want with any variables that we have. I said, what are the other parts of block that you might want to use in a playbook? There's also rescue and always, and you can go look into those and see what other things block can do, but that's not something that I necessarily use very often. I said, what are the directories that are created for webroot, and why is this important to know this? Well, webroot are all of the var ww html underscore dev underscore test and underscore whatever. It looks like my thing broke. Hold on. This is broken. Or we just went over the usage on it. Where's the book at? There. How does looping variable change when you push over the HTML for each page? Why is it important to change the name as you deploy them? That one was the one that I said was kind of interesting. When we were catting out the root, when we were pushing these over, right, and we push them over here, and we were grabbing them one way, but we were, no, that one's not a good example. We were grabbing them one way here from answers, and it was environment index HTML, environment underscore index. But when we were putting them in there, we changed them over to index.html. Excuse me, this way. we were renaming them on the fly. This is as we were deleting them, right? Well, let's wait, where are we at here? Let's block present. You know what's funny? I don't think that would deploy properly. If we were trying to redeploy these, I don't think this would work. Why did I leave all that off? Anyways, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for the lab. I might have to go through and modify some of that because it looks like I didn't loop. Like I didn't write my loop in any of these. For the destroy, I swear a bunch of stuff got deleted out of here. Which is weird because these are up in Git, but I need to do a better job of watching because I suspect when people do pull requests that like sometimes I'm missing things or something because I see. Oh, okay, there's environment. Okay, because it is individual. It's not looping over. Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But that one definitely that doesn't need to be there. All right, doesn't matter. But man, we're over 3 hours already. We did all that. We've done the lab. We've been jumping down in the lab book as I finished the different pieces to show you guys some of the other stuff. Let's go back to where we were. So we were right here finishing up. Did package managers, did NFS, did Apache. The next one would be monitoring. So this is our fun little monitoring set of labs that we've done these ones quite a bit and I'd say pretty regularly. But what we might do here is might take a little break. What's our time at? 10:40. We'll take a little bit of a not a break like a break, but a break being done. I will be down in the Discord. I always hang out down in the Discord if anybody needs me for anything. But I will also maybe be on later, but for sure expect me to be setting up the automation course that we have the automation stuff all set up. And I will get you guys kind of going on that because I think a lot of people are pretty excited for that. I think people always get super excited for the courses and then they maybe get burned out a little quick. I want to avoid that as much as possible, but I can't lax the amount of work we need. I mean, we still need to do work if we want changes in ourselves, obviously, that kind of stuff. So, all right, I'm done getting on my soapbox. I appreciate you guys coming. I will see some of you guys later.